Chapter 2262. In 3 days, Lin Sun's castle had taken on a new look. He made full use of the huge corpse of the alien beast like a black bull. The bones and skin were refined into a set of 4,900 formation flags, which were distributed around the castle. They could be used as a large spirit-gathering formation during cultivation. In battle, they could be rearranged into the lifeless killing formation. The power source of the formation was the chaotic spiritual energy distributed in the starry sky. It could maintain the lifeless killing formation for a quarter of an hour. To Lin Sun's regret, the power of the order on the Great Wall was too high and obscure to be used. Otherwise, the power of the lifeless killing formation would be doubled. The essence of the beast's blood and viscera was extracted and refined into 99 blood yuan pills, which were comparable to the source crystals of Tao and could quickly replenish the consumed physical strength. The teeth and horn were refined into a group of bone swords, each of which was engraved with dense Taoist patterns. It was a pity that all external objects and forces couldn't be used on the Great Wall. Lin Sun couldn't take out a huge amount of divine materials. When refining this set of bone swords, the materials were limited, and the power was extremely limited when it was refined successfully. In other words, this set of bone swords could only be regarded as an incomplete semi-finished product. Lin Sun planned to continue refining this set of bone swords if he could hunt more alien beasts in the following time. As for the meat of the alien beast like a black bull, well, it was Lin Sun's food. In short, such an alien beast was a treasure all over the body of the second level of the Emperor Realm. He could get a lot of divine materials comparable to the Emperor Realm by refining it casually. A tempting smell of barbecue permeated the air. In front of the castle, a bonfire was blazing, on which there was a row of meat skewers. Pieces of tender meat were pierced by slender bone skewers. As they were roasted by the flame of the wonderful Tao fire, the meat skewers gradually became brown and oily. Sprinkled with some air-dried scale powder for seasoning, it gave off a mouth-watering fragrance. Lin Sun squatted in front of the bonfire, focusing on the barbecue. Even though the flesh of this space beast that was like a black bull was extremely delicious, it was extremely tough as well, and it had to be roasted by an extremely overbearing flame like the myriad Tao flame in order to slowly dissolve the natural essence contained within the meat. Smelling the aroma, Lin Sun's appetite was aroused. He hadn't roasted meat so attentively for many years. Soon, Lin Sun skillfully picked up a skewer of meat. When he chewed it in his mouth, the taste buds on the tip of his tongue seemed to be loosened, and the deliciousness of the barbecue steamed between his mouth and teeth, causing Lin Sun to squint his eyes. He simply couldn't imagine that the meat of this exotic beast could be so delicious. The only regret was that there wasn't enough seasoning. Otherwise, the taste of the skewers would be even better. It would be even better if I had wine. Lin Sun sighed. He did have a gourd of wine, but the problem was that he couldn't take it out in the nirvana of freedom. You brat. Hiss, this roasted meat is not bad, battle god Feng Ling's voice sounded in another castle. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he gulped. His divine sense could sense the alluring aroma of the skewers of roasted meat. He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "This ingredient is definitely the best in the world. If I can add some heavenly spirit red pepper powder, brush it with a layer of 5-flavor spirit oil refined from the Ba Serpent's inner core, and supplement it with the star frost purple salt produced in the Xian cave world, the taste will definitely be even better." His saliva almost flowed out of his mouth as he spoke. Even Lin Sun couldn't help but be astonished. This old guy was definitely a first-rate foodie. He was actually so knowledgeable about ingredients and seasonings. Normal people definitely wouldn't be so particular about food. Battle God Feng Ling quickly said, "Young friend, leave some of these ingredients for me. When the nirvana of freedom ends, I'll exchange some treasures with you. Also, leave some bones for me as well. We can use them to boil into a nourishing soup." "Oh, where's the kidney? You didn't lose the kidney, right?" This thing is extremely precious, leave it for me as well. Lin Sun. He almost suspected that battle god Feng Ling was from the Tao Tai tribe and was walking on the path of becoming a chef. Fellow cultivator, are you here to discuss delicacies with me? Lin Sun asked casually as he wolfed down his skewers. Battle god Feng Ling hesitated for a moment before replying, that's not it. I'm just bored, so I wanted to chat with you. Lin Sun continued to gobble down his skewers. Go ahead. Battle god Feng Ling's throat rolled again as he watched Lin Sun gorge down his skewers. He took a deep breath, swallowed his saliva, and said in a bad mood, can you not eat first? Are you purposely envious of me? Lin Sun wolfed down his skewers like a gust of wind. He then picked up a slender bone pick and picked his teeth with satisfaction. Oh, all right, what do you want to talk about? Battle god Feng Ling was just about to speak, but he couldn't bring himself to continue. What's there to talk about? I'm not in the mood, he muttered resentfully. Lin Sun chuckled. This old man Feng Ling wasn't bad. Right at this moment, a dense mass of shadows suddenly appeared in the distant starry sky, obscuring even the twinkling stars. Huh? There was only a small-scale beast tied 3 days ago, why is there another one now? Battle god Feng Ling's voice sounded with surprise. Is it strange? Lin Sun asked. In the past 7 years, there would be a beast tied every 7 days, and at the longest, it wouldn't even happen once every 10 days or half a month. Battle god Feng Ling suddenly let out a strange cry. Wait, why are there so many astral beasts this time? In the depths of the starry sky, a dense mass of black shadows moved about like black ink. As they neared, the black shadows grew larger and larger, they were like a tide, flooding the starry sky. Wherever they passed, countless stars were completely obscured, making them seem tiny and insignificant. Lin Sun's pupils contracted. There were at least a few hundred of them. This was a rare large-scale beast tide. Damn it, another fierce battle is about to break out. In the past, every time a beast tide of this scale broke out, there would definitely be Emperor Realm cultivators falling, but this time, oh no, get ready for battle. At this moment, all the Emperor Realm cultivators on the Great Wall were alarmed, and their expressions were grave. In the past 7 years, a beast tide of this scale had only happened a few times, and every time it happened, there would definitely be deaths. The atmosphere became tense. The Great Wall stretched across the starry sky like a long line of defense, and at this moment, waves of order energy began to emanate from it. Young friend, you really have to be careful this time. Battle god Feng Ling's expression was grave. He could already see some astral beasts rushing toward the area where he and Lin Sun were, each of them emitting a cold and ferocious aura. Lin Sun nodded and stood up from the ground. He came to the front of the castle, and his tall figure was like a spear, his clothes fluttering in the wind. Oh no, why are all those evil beasts coming toward us? Soon, battle god Feng Ling sensed that something was wrong, and his pupils contracted in shock. He almost couldn't believe his eyes. Lin Sun also sensed that something was wrong. The dense mass of astral beasts were like a school of sharks that smelled blood, and they were all rushing toward their direction. This scene was enough to make anyone despair. The powerful cultivators in other areas of the Great Wall also sensed this strange scene, and all of them were bewildered. What was going on? After 7 years of fighting with the astral beasts, all the Emperor cultivators knew that although these beasts were extremely powerful, they only had instinctive consciousness and no intelligence. But now, they seemed to have gathered together and were rushing toward the same place. This had never happened before. Boom! The order energy on the Great Wall transformed into a turbulent torrent that rushed into the starry sky, and in the blink of an eye, the hundreds of astral beasts that were rushing toward them were scattered. Clearly, the order energy of the Great Wall had also sensed the danger and started to counterattack. This scene made many Emperor cultivators secretly heave a sigh of relief. Luckily, this was the Great Wall. If those evil beasts wanted to gather together and break through the defensive line, they would definitely be counterattacked by the Great Wall. However, to everyone's astonishment, the scattered astral beasts did not retreat, nor did they rush toward other areas. After stabilizing themselves, they once again rushed toward the same direction. These evil beasts must be under someone's orders. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so crazy. An old monster deduced. It's also possible that he was distracted by a fellow Taoist, which led to such a scene. Many people were bewildered. This was too terrifying. This was the first time something like this had happened in the past 7 years. It's over. At this time, Battle Monarch Ling Kong's expression was ugly, and his heart sank. Although the astral beasts were being attacked by the order energy of the Great Wall, many of them were still charging toward them. The huge figure and the cold and ferocious aura had completely enveloped the entire area. Battle Monarch Ling Kong was a 4th-level Emperor cultivator. He had been through countless battles in his life, and had experienced countless dangers. But at this moment, he felt a chill run down his spine. He even saw that there was a terrifying existence comparable to a 5th-level Emperor among the astral beasts that were charging toward him. How was he supposed to fight them? Looks like this old bag of bones will be buried here today. Battle Monarch Ling Kong felt bitter. Battle Emperor Ling Kong felt a bitter taste in his mouth. This was the Great Wall of 10,000 Paths, the Nirvana path that belonged to the Emperor realm. No one would be able to leave this place before the 10-year deadline. This also meant that he could only defend this place and fight with his life on the line. These bastards, even if I die, I will drag you down with me. Battle Monarch Ling Kong swore to himself. However, to his surprise, the alien beasts that were charging towards this area completely ignored his existence and whizzed in another direction. Battle Monarch Ling Kong, who was ready to fight to his death, was stunned. Then his expression changed and he yelled, "My young friend, be careful!" He could see that the astral beasts were charging toward the castle where Lin Sun was. He couldn't believe it. How could a mere emperor-to-be attract the attention of so many astral beasts? Could it be because of the meal he ate earlier, barbecue? Battle Monarch Ling Kong knew that this was a ridiculous guess, but he couldn't think of any reason why Lin Sun's performance was so eye-catching that it attracted such a terrifying massacre. Chapter 2263. The power of order surged and spread out like a tidal wave. Although it managed to disperse the astral beast army, there were still more astral beasts charging at Lin Sun. Lin Sun was certain that these beasts were coming for him. He didn't have time to think too much. He gathered his strength and waited. The power in his body instantly rose to its peak, becoming arrogant and tyrannical. Roar! The first to charge at Lin Sun was an astral beast. Its wings were as black as the clouds in the sky and its claws were as large as a house. With its roar, the horrible bloody light rushed out and turned into a big net covering the sky, covering Lin Sun. 3rd-level Emperor realm. Lin Sun's eyes were emotionless. He immediately determined his opponent's strength and waved his sleeve. Boom! Waves of sword aura shot into the sky like a raging ocean. A deafening collision sounded. Tao light and divine light intertwined and spread out in the sky far away from the castle. The astral beast was instantly struck by the sword aura. Its wings were torn and blood poured out like a waterfall. It roared at the sky in pain, its voice shaking the sky. Before it could dodge, a set of 18 bone swords whizzed out and formed a sword formation that slashed down viciously. The astral beast was slain in an instant. The shining bone swords were stained with blood. So cruel! In the distance, battle god Feng Ling's eyes widened in disbelief. His heart was in his throat. 3 days ago, he saw Lin Sun slay a astral beast that was comparable to a 2nd-level Emperor realm cultivator. But at this moment, the bird that was equivalent to a 3rd-level Emperor realm expert was destroyed in an instant. This kind of heaven-defying killing power was unimaginable. In reality, there was a reason why Lin Sun was able to do this so easily. Although the astral beast was strong, it was restrained by the power of order in front of the myriad Tao corridor, which weakened its fighting strength. Furthermore, the astral beast only had the instinct to kill. It had no intelligence. No matter how strong it was, a true third-level Emperor Realm cultivator couldn't compare to it. Therefore, Lin Sun, who already had the strength to suppress a third-level Emperor Realm cultivator, could easily slay an opponent of this level. However, Lin Sun's expression was a little solemn. This was merely the first Cosmos Beast, and there were over 10 more Cosmos Beasts charging over from even further away. Every single one of them had strange shapes and monstrous auras, and they were savage, brutal, and bloodthirsty. Even the weakest of them were at the second level of the Emperor Realm, while the strongest made Lin Sun's heart palpitate. He couldn't tell how strong they were. Further away, due to the obstruction of the power of order, there were still many galactic beasts scattered around, and they could attack at any time. All of this was aimed at him alone, so one could imagine how terrifying it was. It was enough to make even emperors feel despair. In fact, at this moment, castles in other parts of the Great Wall were nervously watching this battle. The scale of this beast tide could be said to be unprecedented, but the strange thing was that such a terrifying beast tide was coming for a single person. However, this allowed the other experts stationed on the Great Wall to avoid a great disaster. This situation also gave those Emperor Realm experts the opportunity to pay attention to this battle. Unfortunately, the Great Wall was extremely long, and the distance between castles was also extremely far. Those old monsters from the starry sky could only see the direction of the beast tide's attack. He could only see the direction of the beast tide's attack, but he couldn't see clearly who had suffered such a terrifying attack. Only Battle Emperor Ling Feng was the closest, so he could also see what was happening, but he didn't reveal Lin Sun's identity. Boom! In the starry sky in front of Lin Sun's castle, there was a turbulence, and the huge figures of Cosmos Beasts filled the void and rushed over. Even the power of order of the Great Wall couldn't stop them from rushing forward. At this moment, Lin Sun took a deep breath, and his black eyes were burning with the flames of war. This was the Nirvana Road that belonged to the Emperor Realm, but at the same time, it was also the Nirvana Road that belonged to Lin Sun. Whoosh! A burst of Taoist light rolled, and the 5 doppelgangers of Greenwood, Yellow Earth, Scarlet Fire, Black Water, and Platinum all appeared out of thin air. Lin Sun thought to himself, although today's battle is dangerous, as long as I can resolve it, I will definitely become a great emperor. Everyone, let's fight together. Lin Sun was the first to attack. His figure was dazzling, and there seemed to be a chaotic world emerging, like a furnace, like an abyss, but not an abyss. Boom! A cosmos beast that looked like a giant python rushed over, and it opened its bloody mouth, which seemed to be able to swallow the sun, the moon, and the stars, producing an unparalleled suction force. Lin Sun didn't dodge, and he punched out. The fist force was like a furnace, and it seemed to have the power to suppress both ancient and modern times. It tore the void apart, and also blasted open the python's defense force. In the earth-shattering collision, Lin Sun's fist force smashed down, and the python's head was directly punched open by the fist force, leaving a huge bloody hole. It let out a roar, and its body struggled violently. Its tail, which was as thick as a mountain ridge, swept across, producing an unparalleled violent force. Boom! A beam of divine flame that was even more dazzling than the sun shot out, and the giant python's tail was instantly incinerated, turning into ashes. It was Scarlet Fire Taoist Body who made a move, using the eyes of burning ashes. Kill! 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 At the same time, Greenwood Taoist Body, Yellow Taoist Body, and the other 2 doppelgangers also made a move, each displaying their strongest means, showing different powers. The starry sky was in chaos, as if an unprecedented melee had broken out. The stars were trembling, the sun and the moon were dim, and the roaring Taoist light and the sweeping divine light were like raging waves, spreading in all directions. It was too terrifying. The destructive power produced by more than a dozen cosmos beasts attacking together could easily destroy a small world. At this time, in front of the castle, Lin Sun and his 5 doppelgangers were the only ones. Boom! The battle was fierce, and scarlet blood could be seen everywhere. The earth-shattering roar resounded like thunder, shaking the starry sky. Looking from a distance, it seemed that a war between ancient gods and demons had broken out. The sky was dark, and the earth was dark, setting off endless blood and turbulence. Lin Sun and his 5 doppelgangers defended the castle, killing with all their might, not daring to hold back at all. His body was tall and sturdy, galloping and flashing in front of the castle. All kinds of supreme Taoist scriptures and killing means were at his fingertip. Every move he made exuded an invincible and peerless elegance. His 5 doppelgangers were not inferior in any way, and each of them moved about and assisted Lin Sun in killing. Rumble, the area was becoming more and more turbulent. The Great Wall was protected by the power of order, so it naturally could not be shaken, but this did not provide much protection for Lin Sun. In such a situation, he could only rely on himself. Kill. His black eyes were like an abyss, and the battle intent around him was mobilized to display the wonders of battle. Every attack was full of destructive power, and it was fierce and domineering. Those who were injured by him didn't need to be entangled with him at all. The other clones of the Great Tao would take the opportunity to destroy them. Their coordination was flawless. In just a short while, he killed 6 cosmos beasts, and blood splattered across the starry sky. This kid, Battle Emperor Feng Ling, was stunned as he witnessed this scene. If he were in Lin Sun's shoes, he would not have the confidence to resist such a terrifying attack. But Lin Sun, a mere quasi-emperor, was killing like a god in the fierce battle, and he even took advantage of the situation to kill several cosmos beasts. This completely shocked Battle Emperor Feng Ling. Since ancient times, who had ever seen such a heaven-defying young man? Not a single one. Battle Emperor Feng Ling couldn't help but wonder what his chances of winning would be if he were to fight Lin Sun. The more he thought about it, the more shocked he became. But Battle Emperor Feng Ling also noticed that although Lin Sun was killing fiercely, he had too many opponents, and many of them were currently blocked far away, and they could attack at any time. In short, Lin Sun was still in an extremely dangerous situation. At this moment, Battle Emperor Feng Ling was both shocked and worried, and he couldn't help but clench his fists. Feng Ling, which cultivator is facing such a great calamity? Fierce. Too fierce. Who is this fellow Taoist? He must be at least a 5th-level martial emperor in order to have such combat strength, right? Feng Ling, many martial emperors spread their thoughts to inquire, and they were all extremely shocked. Battle Emperor Feng Ling ignored them and pursed his lips in silence. Lin Sun was the successor of Mount Heart and Mind, and he was wanted by Heavenly Thart Sure. He was the target of all the major forces in the universe. Once his identity was exposed, he would definitely attract countless hostile gazes. Of course, on the Great Wall, no one could leave their respective castles. This also meant that even if Lin Sun's identity was exposed, as long as the path of nirvana didn't end, he would not be attacked by other martial emperors. But at least in front of Battle Emperor Feng Ling, he wouldn't reveal Lin Sun's identity. In the distance, the battle was getting more and more intense. The astral beasts that were charging over were all huge, and they filled up the entire starry sky, blocking many people's eyes. They could only vaguely see Lin Sun's figure flickering in front of the castle as he fought with all his might. The divine light and Taoist light he released were like countless suns exploding, blinding everyone's eyes. 15 minutes later, along with countless exclamations of shock, the last astral beast that had reached Lin Sun's castle was killed on the spot. The entire starry sky was dyed red by thick blood, and a rain of blood poured down. He killed 13 astral beasts in 15 minutes. Battle Emperor Ling Feng was completely dumbfounded, and his body and mind were completely shaken. In the past 7 years, he had only killed 2 astral beasts, but Lin Sun had killed several times that number in this battle. The most incredible thing was that in the face of such an overwhelming slaughter, not only did he, a mere quasi-emperor, manage to survive, he even had a chance of winning for the time being. The successors of Mount Heart and Mind, each one is more abnormal than the other. Battle Emperor Ling Feng's eyes began to drift as he thought back to the astonishing performance of those successors of Mount Heart and Mind during the chess match, and his heart trembled even more. At this time, Lin Sun stood in front of the castle, panting slightly, and his face was a little pale. He had expended more than half of his cultivation and physical strength in that short 15 minutes of slaughter. Even though he had killed the horde of astral beasts, Lin Sun's heart had become heavy. Because there were still hundreds of astral beasts in the distance, this was a despairing number. Chapter 2264. It's him! So it's the remnant of Mount Fangtsuan. How is that possible? Gasps of surprise rang out from the Great Wall. Without the colossal figures of the starry sky, exotic beasts to conceal them, some of the old monsters with profound cultivation could vaguely see Lin Sun's appearance from a great distance away. For a moment they were all in disbelief. Their first reaction was that the remnant of Mount Fangtsuan, who was wanted by the entire world, had actually dared to come to Nirvana of freedom? Then, they found it hard to believe that the Great Wall was the path of nirvana for martial emperors. But now, the remnant of Mount Fangtsuan, who was only at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm, had actually appeared here. Then, an indescribable shock welled up in their hearts. They had witnessed the incomparably dangerous battle just now. The simultaneous attack of more than 10 starry sky exotic beasts was enough to make even the martial emperors feel despair. Originally, they had suspected that the person guarding the castle was at least at the 5th level of the martial emperor realm. But now, the truth told them that it was a quasi-emperor. Who would dare to believe it? At this moment, the martial emperors felt their scalps go numb, as if their understanding of the world had been overturned. They all knew very well that it was impossible to rely on external objects or forces on the Great Wall. This also meant that in the previous battle, Lin Sun, a quasi-emperor, had killed a group of starry sky exotic beasts with his own combat strength. Moreover, it had only taken him a quarter of an hour. This was undoubtedly so shocking that it would even shake the heavens if word of it got out. Because since ancient times, there had never been a quasi-emperor who could surpass the natural chasm of the martial emperor realm and kill an enemy. How can this damned remnant be so heaven-defying? Many martial emperors had ugly expressions on their faces. Most of them came from forces that hated Lin Sun to the core, such as Untainted Land, Panwu, Qiankuan, and multitude demons. Like the 10 war clans, some far ancient imperial clans, the Divine Sunshine Ancient Sect, and the Hidden Land Realm. If possible, they wished they could go and kill Lin Sun right now. The successors of Mount Fangtsuan are indeed more heaven-defying than the last. When Heavenly Emperor Shi ordered Lin Sun to be hunted down, it seemed like he was making a mountain out of a molehill. But now, it seems that Heavenly Emperor Shi had his reasons. Some emperors who had no grievances with Lin Sun couldn't help sighing with emotion. Fangtsuan Mountain. It was just an inheritance, yet it produced so many legendary figures that were enough to stun the ages. This was something no one could feel any jealousy towards. The difference was just too great. Beggars would not be jealous of millionaires, but they would be jealous of beggars who were better at begging than them. This was human nature. That kid has just experienced a fierce battle. No matter how heaven-defying he is, his physical strength has been greatly exhausted. Moreover, there are a few hundred cosmos beasts in the depths of the starry sky that have their eyes on him. This is simply a hopeless situation. In that case, it's extremely likely that this kid will perish here? It's not just a high possibility, it's a certainty that he'll die. Forget him, any imperial emperor on the Great Wall would be able to survive such a situation. Many old monsters could see that Lin Sun was still in a precarious situation and might die at any time. In the distant starry sky, under the impact of the Order power, hundreds of astral beasts were scattered in different areas. But they seemed extremely persistent. As soon as they stood firm, they continued to rush madly towards the castle where Lin Sun was. Under such circumstances, no one believed that Lin Sun could survive. The imperial emperors who hated Lin Sun couldn't help but rejoice in his misfortune. As long as Lin Sun was in trouble, they would be very happy. They couldn't be bothered to care who killed him. These old bastards, they're simply shameless. Battle Emperor Feng Ling was exasperated. He felt very uncomfortable when he heard those discussions. The starry sky couldn't tolerate a single Lin Sun? Young friend, can you still hold on? He couldn't help but ask. I won't die, Lin Sun replied casually. He had already swallowed the blood yuan pill. He had just refined and was making the best use of his time to recover his physical strength. These blood yuan pills were extremely powerful. They were refined from the precious blood of astral beasts and had an astonishing recovery ability. You can't die no matter what. Battle Emperor Feng Ling gritted his teeth and said, Who knows how many people on the Great Wall are waiting to see you make a fool of yourself. They can't wait for you to die. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed when he heard this. He then smiled and said, I knew this would happen. Don't worry, fellow cultivator, I won't let them get what they want. As he spoke, he had already swallowed 17 blood yuan pills and recovered most of his physical strength. He was only a hair's breadth away from completely returning to his peak state. Battle Emperor Ling Feng still seemed worried and said loudly, Don't brag. As long as you can live, I won't hold it against you even if you call me fellow cultivator in the future. Lin Sun's heart warmed. This old guy was really not bad. Boom! Suddenly, the starry sky in the distance trembled. Almost 20 astral beasts dodged the attack of the power of order and charged towards the castle where Lin Sun was. Among them, there were a few auras comparable to the 4th level of the Emperor realm. There was even a terrifying existence comparable to the 5th level of the Emperor realm. Battle Emperor Ling Feng's face turned pale and his hands and feet went cold. How was he supposed to fight now? Lin Sun also sensed the danger and even felt a great deal of pressure. He could still put up a fight against a 4th level Emperor realm cultivator, but if it was a 5th level Emperor realm cultivator, then it would be serious. However, this was the Great Wall after all. The omnipresent power of order had a natural suppressive effect on the astral beasts and greatly weakened their combat strength. Moreover, these astral beasts had no intelligence. They only had the instinct of bloodthirst and killing. Lin Sun still had a certain degree of confidence in this battle. Boom! The void trembled and the roars of the astral beasts shook heaven and earth. The astral beasts charged towards Lin Sun, each and every one of them terrifying and cruel. Lin Sun's figure flashed and his 5 avatars whizzed out. They attacked with all their strength, not daring to be careless. 8-direction sword formation. 3 inches of eternal silence. 1 cauldron to 10,000 techniques. He exerted all kinds of powerful techniques with all his might. In an instant, the battle broke out again. The sound of Tao rumbled and the light of Tao swept out in all directions. But from this moment on, the Emperor Realm cultivators who were scattered across the Great Wall had completely changed their mind. Just as Battle Emperor Feng Ling had said, those who were hostile to Lin Sun couldn't wait for him to die. Even those who had no grudges against Lin Sun watched coldly from the sidelines. Occasionally they would sigh, pity, or sympathize with him. But no one would worry about him, because he was a remnant of Mount Fangsuan, a wanted target of Heavenly Emperor Shi. He was the one who had humiliated those major forces. This was how the starry heavens treated Lin Sun. Perhaps only Battle Emperor Feng Ling was different from them. Kill! Lin Sun was practically bathed in blood as he fought. Even though he'd casually slaughtered numerous cosmos beasts in this chaotic battle, he'd suffered injuries as well, and his 5 clones had been affected as well. The reason was that among the astral beasts, there were existences comparable to the 4th-level Emperor Realm, and there was even a suspected 5th-level Emperor Realm beast. However, this kind of injury was nothing to Lin Sun. In the past years, he had suffered injuries that were 10 times or even 100 times more serious than this. Rumble! The starry sky trembled violently. The sun and moon dimmed as crimson blood mixed with mournful roars reverberated in the void. Lin Sun was continuously injured. But at the same time, the number of astral beasts attacking him was also decreasing. Battle Emperor Ling Kong's eyes widened. He was shocked by Lin Sun's heaven-defying strength and couldn't help but sweat for him. It was too tragic. If he was in Lin Sun's shoes, he wouldn't be able to hold on until now. He didn't dare to imagine where Lin Sun got his strength and foundation to fight for so long with only the cultivation of a quasi-emperor. Although the other Emperor Realm cultivators couldn't see Lin Sun clearly, they could see that the number of astral beasts attacking him was decreasing. This made their expressions change. They almost thought they were dreaming. It was already heaven-defying to be able to surpass the natural barrier of the Emperor Realm. But now, the remnant of Mount Fangtsuan could fight against a group of even stronger and more ferocious astral beasts. Astral beasts comparable to the 4th level of the Emperor Realm couldn't do anything to him. If he doesn't die, I'm afraid there will be another Emperor of War on the starry ancient path in the future, an old monster said with a livid expression. Many Emperor Realm cultivators shuddered when they heard this. Emperor of War. That was a peerless madman who had defeated the previous nameless venerable emperor, a proud and undefeatable legend. If Lin Sun also possessed the power of an Emperor of War in the future, those who were once hostile to him would all suffer. Don't worry, everyone. This man is dead for sure. Hundreds of astral beasts can't kill a mere quasi-emperor. Someone spoke viciously, his voice filled with a curse. Many people felt relieved. Hundreds of astral beasts were enough to make any Emperor Realm cultivator collapse, not to mention a mere quasi-emperor? Rumble. The battle was still going on. Lin Sun was already bathed in blood and riddled with injuries. His tall figure showed signs of damage. The same was true for the 5 doppelgangers. It had been 10 minutes since the beginning of the battle and Lin Sun had killed 14 astral beasts. There were only 4 of them left in the field. But of these 4 astral beasts, 3 were comparable to the 4th level of the Emperor Realm, and 1 even had the power of a 5th level of the Emperor Realm. Almost all of Lin Sun's injuries were caused by these 4 astral beasts. At this time, everyone could see that Lin Sun was about to collapse. This made many old monsters who hated Lin Sun very excited. They couldn't wait to see the scene of his death. Battle Emperor Feng Ling wore a sorrowful expression. There was a limit to one's strength. Was this kid's heaven-defying strength really going to end here? Was he going to be killed by those beasts? At this time, Lin Sun was still as calm as snow. He took a deep breath and resisted the urge to use forbidden death. He waved his sleeves. The lifeless killing formation he had set up around the castle rumbled and activated. P.S. I saw the comments in the book review section, so I added an update tonight. Chapter 2265. The Great Wall of 10,000 Paths. The lifeless killing formation rumbled, as if it had just woken up from a deep slumber. Countless green lotuses bloomed and flowed with a mysterious Tao glow. This formation was listed as the 9th killing formation of all heavens. It had once displayed its invincible might during the Tao battle of the ancient martial emperors and allowed Array Emperor Lu to become a martial emperor in one battle. Although the lifeless killing formation that Lin Sun had set up was unable to reach its peak due to the lack of divine materials, its power was still enough to kill a martial emperor. The heavens and earth rumbled. Only now did battle god Feng Ling, who had fallen into a sorrowful state, discover that tens of thousands of azure lotus flowers had suddenly appeared in the starry sky. Each and every lotus flower was the projection of a god, and they all radiated with boundless light. Tao sounds rang out and a dazzling divine brilliance shook the universe. Lifeless killing formation. At this moment, many old monsters who had participated in the Tao battle of the ancient martial emperors blurted out and recognized the infamous ninth killing formation of all heavens. Then, in the starry sky, 3 beasts with the strength of a 4th-level emperor realm and 1 5th-level emperor realm were trapped in the lifeless killing formation. Divine brilliance surged and talisman inscriptions flowed. From time to time, furious roars of beasts could be heard. At this moment, Lin Sun took advantage of the situation and charged into the formation. He knew very well that although the lifeless killing formation was powerful, it had almost no chance of killing the exotic beast comparable to a 5th-level martial emperor. Kill. Inside the formation, murderous intent surged like a tide, and an unparalleled power swept out. Lin Sun's figure shuttled through the formation, and in a short period of time, he had killed the 3 exotic beasts comparable to a 4th-level martial emperor. Although these beasts were powerful, they had no intelligence. After being trapped in the formation, they ran amok like headless flies. It was not difficult to kill them. Only the exotic beast comparable to a 5th-level martial emperor was a little difficult. In the end, Lin Sun paid the price of some injuries before he managed to kill it. How did this remnant of Mount Fengtsuan manage to control Array Emperor Lu's lifeless killing formation? When Lin Sun walked out of the lifeless killing formation, exclamations of disbelief sounded from the Great Wall. Previously, everyone thought that Lin Sun would definitely die. A quasi-emperor like him would not be able to withstand the attacks of so many exotic beasts. But who would have thought that not only did Lin Sun not die, he even killed all of his opponents. Good, good, good. Battledharch Feng Ling yelled excitedly, unable to control his emotions. This battle was far too difficult. Lin Sun's clothes were stained with blood and his face was pale. Although the wounds all over his body had healed, he had suffered serious injuries. The most troublesome thing was that this battle had almost drained his physical strength. When he returned to the castle, he sat down cross-legged without any hesitation and quickly swallowed the blood vitality pill. The lifeless killing formation was still in operation, and could at most last for about half a quarter of an hour. This meant that even if the cosmos beasts in the distant starry sky charged over once more, they would be obstructed by the lifeless killing formation. However, it was only a quarter of an hour. After a quarter of an hour, the lifeless killing formation would collapse due to exhaustion. At that time, Lin Sun, who was stationed in the castle, could only rely on himself to fight. If it were anyone else, they would have collapsed and fallen into complete despair after being left with only a quarter of an hour to catch their breath. But Lin Sun's state of mind and willpower didn't fluctuate at all, and he didn't waste any time. Recover. He would recover as much as he could. Right now, it was not the time to be at the end of the line. Roar, in the distant starry sky, among the hundreds of cosmos beasts that had been obstructed by the power of order, another group rushed over. There were still nearly 20 of them, and their auras were terrifying and their killing intent was surging like a tide. Boom! Although the lifeless killing formation had blocked the attacks of these cosmos beasts, it was still tumbling violently, and there were signs that it was about to collapse. Lin Sun remained indifferent and focused on repairing his body. But in other places there was a commotion at this moment, and all kinds of gloating and sarcastic voices sounded. "I've said it's impossible for this guy to escape. Just wait and see, that castle will be his grave. Haha, it's good that he's dead. If he's alive, the starry sky will be thrown into chaos by him alone." Hearing these discussions, Battle Emperor Feng Ling felt as if his heart was being pricked by needles, and his beard and hair stood on end. These old bastards were too despicable. He took a deep breath and suppressed the anxiety and worry in his heart. Lin Sun hadn't met with disaster yet, and there was still a chance of survival. Even if this chance of survival was extremely slim. But until the very last moment, Battle Emperor Feng Ling still wouldn't believe that such a nature-defying young man would perish here just like that. Crack! Crack! In a dark and desolate world, cracks suddenly appeared on the ground, emitting a faint cracking sound. Soil and debris scattered in the air, and a slender figure sat up from the cracked ground floor before leaping up reflexively. Her entire body was full of wariness and vigilance. After a long while, she gradually calmed down. She couldn't remember how many times she had undergone nirvana transformation. After each transformation, her combat strength would also reach a new level. She had already gotten used to all of this over the years. She made a grabbing motion with her right hand. Clang! In the distance, a white bone spear shot out like a bolt of silver lightning and landed in her palm. She looked up at the dark and gloomy sky in the distance, and she walked into the distance in silence. The brim of her hat covered her face, and her black robes fluttered in the wind. As her slender and straight figure walked, it was as if a streak of dark light was spreading around her. Her right hand was as translucent as suet jade, and it was fair and slender. Her 5 fingers gripped onto the white bone spear, and each of her fingers was like a freshly peeled spring onion. One couldn't help but think of the phrase, hands as soft as silk, skin as smooth as cream. Her figure was extremely tall and slender, and she had a unique and cold demeanor about her. As she walked in this dark and desolate world, she appeared silent and persistent. However, after a long time, she suddenly stopped in her tracks, and a hint of confusion flashed across her eyes, which were hidden under the brim of her hat. Why hadn't the galaxy mutant beasts attacked after so long this time? She looked up into the depths of the sky. This was a starry sky that was as dark as night. In the past, the galaxy mutant beasts would come from the depths of the starry sky. As long as they sensed her aura, they would rush toward her like moths to a flame. But this time, it seemed to be different. She pondered silently about exactly how long she had been silent this time, but she couldn't figure it out no matter how hard she tried. She puckered her lips, and then her figure flashed. Her graceful figure was like a ray of light that shot into the sky, flew higher and higher, and gradually arrived above the sky. The boundless starry sky seemed to be boundless, and countless stars flickered with dim light. She stared carefully and sensed carefully. As time flowed by, after a long time, her figure flashed like a ray of dark light, and she charged extremely far away. There it is. In next to no time, she locked onto the aura that belonged to the galaxy mutant beasts, and it was moving horizontally towards an extremely distant place. She released her own aura to intentionally alarm the galaxy mutant beast. But to her surprise, the galaxy mutant beast merely glanced in her direction from afar, and then it continued moving horizontally towards the distance. In all these years, it was the first time she had encountered something like this. After pondering for a moment, she chased after it without hesitation. In this world, besides her aura that would attract the attention of the galaxy mutant beast, there was only one other person left. Could it be him? When she thought of this, a rare wave arose in her state of mind that had never fluctuated even after experiencing many years of life and death battles. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion resounded, and the countless large green lotuses that covered the starry sky all exploded, turning into rays of light that drifted across the sky. Without the obstruction, the galaxy mutant beasts immediately rushed towards the castle where Lin Sun was, and a terrifying shadow enveloped the castle. At this time, Lin Sun stood up with a calm expression, and his dark eyes were unfathomable. He had only recovered less than half of his physical strength, and the injuries all over his body had not completely healed. But none of this could affect his fighting spirit. Kill. He took the initiative to attack. Compared to the enormous figure of the galaxy mutant beast, he seemed extremely small. However, when battle god Feng Ling witnessed this scene, he was filled with shock and sorrow. Even his Tao heart began to tremble at this moment. Boom! The battle broke out again, but unlike before, this time Lin Sun was in a state of being suppressed from the very beginning. But even so, his tall figure was like a lonely mountain, and even though it was stained with blood, it gave off an unshakable feeling. He was so fearless, calm. The bloody battle dyed the starry sky red, and from time to time, there would be galaxy mutant beasts falling, but most of them were below the third-level martial emperor realm. Lin Sun, on the other hand, was constantly injured, and these injuries were all caused by those who were above the third-level martial emperor realm. This was undoubtedly an incomparably tragic battle, and just looking at it made one feel suffocated, hopeless, and helpless. The old monsters scattered across the Great Wall were also shocked, and they felt incredulous, and their hearts were in turmoil. Even they had to admit that it was an unprecedented miracle that a quasi-emperor Jew she had been able to hold on until now. This had never happened in the past. There was no doubt that this successor of Fangtsuan Mountain was extremely powerful, so powerful that he could shock the world and amaze the heavens. But at the same time, this made the old monsters feel even more uncomfortable, and they became even more fearful of him. They did not dare to imagine what kind of bloody storm Lin Sun would bring to the starry ancient path if he could walk out of the nirvana of freedom alive. Luckily, he's going to die this time. No matter how heaven-defying a dead person is, it's all for naught. An old monster murmured. Pooh. In the midst of the fierce battle, Lin Sun coughed up blood, and his face was ghastly pale. There was not a single part of his body that was unharmed. Although his physical strength was not completely depleted, his injuries were becoming more and more serious. Of the 20 or so galaxy mutant beasts, there were only a dozen or so left kill. He took a deep breath, and his eyes were as determined as ever as he dragged his heavily injured body into battle. At this moment, even Battle Emperor Feng Ling could not bear to watch any longer. There was an indescribable feeling of frustration, grief, and anxiety in his heart that was stuck in his chest, and he had nowhere to vent it. Chapter 2266. The stench of blood permeated the starry sky. Lin Sun's figure was like a small boat in a raging sea. He could be drowned at any time. Those who took pleasure in Lin Sun's misfortune also held their breath at this moment, looking forward to the scene of Lin Sun being killed. At this moment, Lin Sun had two choices. One was to use the forbidden death technique with all his might. But that was only for a split second. Even if he killed all the opponents in front of him, there were still many astral beasts that could charge at him at any time. The other was to take advantage of this opportunity to break through to the martial monarch realm and pave the way to the martial monarch realm. Huff huff, he panted heavily as a look of determination appeared in his eyes. He couldn't delay any longer. Otherwise, he wouldn't have another chance. Boom. An astral beast comparable to a fifth-level martial monarch charged at him. Lin Sun didn't hesitate anymore. But at this moment, a dazzling ray of silver light pierced through the starry sky at an unbelievable speed and tore through the astral beast. Bang! The astral beast comparable to a fifth-level martial monarch was instantly pierced through. Its gigantic body instantly shattered into pieces. The dazzling ray of silver light was a white bone spear that was surrounded by dreamy starlight. It was mysterious and frightening. Lin Sun was all too familiar with this white bone spear. When he walked out of the mine prison for the first time in Feiyan village, he had seen this bone spear. He suddenly raised his head and saw a slender figure bathed in darkness in the distant starry sky. The figure's clothes fluttered in the wind as it flew towards him. Just like before, she was covered in a black cloak, and the brim of her hat covered her face. But she was different from before. She was tall and slender, and when she walked, she had a unique aura of solitude and coldness. An indescribable surprise surged up in Lin Sun's heart. Then, he became excited and his eyes were filled with surprise and joy. Xiaoji! Why was she here? This was unbelievable. This was the nirvana of freedom, but Xiaoji had come from afar. Huh! Xia Zhi's appearance caused battle god Feng Ling's eyes to light up. It was as if he had seen a god who could save his life, and his entire body began to boil with excitement. A turning point had finally appeared. In other places of the Great Wall, those Emperor Realm monsters who were expecting Lin Sun's death were all caught off guard. Who is she? Why did you attack from the starry sky at this time? Damn it! That kid escaped another calamity. Voices mixed with surprise, anger and depression sounded. At this moment, many old monsters who hated Lin Sun flew into a rage and even wanted to kill him. All of this did not affect Xia Zhi at all. She walked through the sky like a dark ray of light passing through the boundless starry sky, and her entire body emitted a peerlessly murderous aura. Clang! The white bone spear swept out like a dazzling silver river, and with a casual flash, it penetrated the head of a space beast, causing a rain of blood that surged into the sky. All these years, she had been fighting in that desolate world alone with a single spear. She had killed an unknown number of these interstellar beasts, and she had long since known their combat strength and weaknesses like the back of her hand. As she flashed over, all the cosmos beasts she encountered along the way didn't even have the chance to obstruct or resist before they were directly crushed by her. In an instant, blood rained down from the starry sky, and cries of anguish shook the heavens. Space beasts comparable to Emperor Realm experts were killed on the spot. And wherever she passed, there was a trail of blood. How is this possible? Who is she? Could she also be a survivor of Mount Fangsuan? Otherwise, how could her combat strength be so terrifying? Damn it! Witnessing this scene, the Emperor Realm cultivators could no longer remain calm. All of them were filled with shock and anger, and they could not believe what they had just witnessed. A mysterious woman bathed in dark light stepped on the corpses of alien beasts as she charged over from the starry sky. Isn't this combat strength a little too terrifying? Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was she helping the survivors of Mount Fangsuan? Questions surged into their minds. Seeing this scene, Lin Sun took a deep breath and smiled. Xia Zhi was still as powerful as before. Every time she came, she would bring him shock and surprise. Boom! The void shook, and the space beasts that besieged Lin Sun were all killed. Endless blood and corpses spread everywhere. Xia Zhi had already come to Lin Sun. Her graceful figure was surrounded by obscure dark luster. Her black robe was fluttering, and her white bone spear was enshrouded in starlight, which made her look like a god coming from the darkness. Standing there, she was already as tall as Lin Sun, and the murderous spirit emitted from her body surprised Lin Sun secretly. They didn't dare to imagine how many killings and battles Xia Zhi had experienced over the years to be able to hone such a pure and terrifying aura. Lin Sun, you are injured. Xia Zhi opened her mouth, and her voice was as clear and ethereal as the sound of nature. Lin Sun suppressed his excitement and raised his hand to rub the girl's head, but he found that she was already as tall as him. Xia Zhi lowered her body. Lin Sun was stunned and raised his hand to touch the girl's head naturally. Even though many years had passed, Xia Zhi was still the same girl in his heart. She had never changed. For a moment, thousands of thoughts and memories of the past came to his mind. Lin Sun, you take care of your wounds first. I will go kill the enemies. From now on, no matter who wants to hurt you, they must ask for my permission. Xia Zhi's words woke Lin Sun up from his thoughts. Before he could react, Xia Zhi had already turned around and rushed to the distant starry sky. Lin Sun didn't know that when she saw him covered in blood and seriously injured, Xia Zhi's heart surged with unprecedented anger. He also didn't know that Xia Zhi had never been so angry over the years, even when she was facing death herself. Everything was because of him. She was angry for the king and fought for the king. When they saw Xia Zhi's figure rushing up again and killing the alien beasts in the distant starry sky blocked by the power of order, the Emperor Realm monsters on the Great Wall couldn't help but feel confused. Kill back? That was a group of alien beasts that could make any emperor feel cold and desperate. Lin Sun's heart tightened as he watched nervously. The battle broke out. Xia Ji seemed incomparably small compared to the astral beasts, but the battle prowess she displayed shocked everyone. There was no dazzling Taoist light, nor was there any earth-shattering power. Her movements were simple and clean. She stabbed, hacked, swept, or pointed with her spear. There were no profound changes at all. But it was this killing method that set off a rain of blood in the starry sky. The bodies of the alien beasts exploded in the void one after another, blood rained down like a waterfall, and wails rang out incessantly. The alien beasts that were comparable to Emperor Realm experts, regardless of their combat strength, were all killed by Xia Ji's spear in the chaotic battle. It was so direct and efficient, yet so fierce and domineering. This sent chills down everyone's spine. Some of the Emperor Realm experts were so shocked that they couldn't believe their eyes. Previously, when Lin Sun, with his cultivation of Quasi-Emperor Ju Shi, killed a group of alien beasts, their understanding was almost overturned. But now, the fierce stance that Xia Ji showed even made those Emperor Realm experts feel ashamed of their inferiority, and they felt terrified and cold. Who was she? No one knew. Lin Sun stared silently for a moment before he gradually relaxed. He returned to the fortress and began to meditate cross-legged. The injuries he suffered this time were indeed too serious, and his physical strength was greatly exhausted. This also caused the blood yuan pills that Lin Sun refined to be constantly consumed like beans. As he meditated, he watched Xia Ji's battle. He couldn't help but wonder where Xia Ji had been all these years. When did her combat strength become so powerful? It should be known that when Xia Ji left, Lin Sun was in seclusion in the Star Chess Sea in the ancient Desolation Domain and was about to embark on a journey to Kunlun ruins. Counting from that time, summer solstice had been gone for decades. It was undoubtedly incredible that Xia Ji had transformed to such a level in just a few decades. Little friend, I didn't expect you to survive. This is great. Battle Emperor Feng Ling's excited and joyful voice sounded from afar. I told you, I won't let those old fogies who wished for me to die get what they want. Lin Sun smiled. Clearly, Battle Emperor Feng Ling had been paying attention to the battle and was worried about him. Sigh, to be honest, I was in despair before, but the appearance of that lady was like a savior from the heavens. Even I was stunned. After rambling on for a long while, the excited battle god Feng Ling finally asked, "By the way, who on earth is this young lady?" Xia Ji, Lin Sun replied concisely. It was just 2 words, but this name had already been given an incomparable weight in his heart, so it became extremely important. Xia Ji. Battle Emperor Feng Ling pondered for a long time with furrowed brows. He had never heard of such an extraordinary being in the heavens. Even among the descendants of Mount Heart and Soul, there was no one with this name. Furthermore, what made Battle Emperor Feng Ling even more incredulous was that this Xia Ji had come from a faraway place and didn't belong to Nirvana of freedom. However, despite his doubts, Battle Emperor Feng Ling didn't ask any more questions. 15 minutes later, there was a deathly silence on the Great Wall. Countless old monsters fell into extreme shock and silence. In the starry sky, hundreds of astral beasts were killed and scattered. Finally, they dispersed and fled into the depths of the starry sky. That's right, the ferocious and bloodthirsty astral beasts were killed and fled at this moment. This was simply earth-shattering. In the 7 years that they had been stationed at the Great Wall, this was the first time that they had seen an astral beast that only had the instinct to kill and flee. At this moment, Xia Ji turned around and walked toward the castle where Lin Sun was with her spear in hand. Her graceful figure was surrounded by darkness, like a fairy or a god. Chapter 2267. The power of order blocked Xia Ji's figure from entering the castle. She could only stand in the void in front of the castle. This made Lin Sun stunned, and then he vaguely guessed the reason. The great wall of 10,000 paths was formed from the order power of nirvana freedom, and the summer solstice came from the depths of the starry sky. Just as he was about to get up, Xiaji said, "I'll be right here. Just focus on healing yourself." She sat cross-legged in the void, with the white bone spear lying in front of her knees. She sat with her back to Lin Sun. Under the brim of the hat that covered her face, her eyes were brighter than the stars, looking at the distant starry sky. He was like a door god, guarding the most important person in her life. "Where have you been all these years?" Lin Sun asked while cultivating. "Fight." Xia Ji's voice was clear and calm. After a pause, she said, "What about you?" "Me." Lin Sun's eyes flickered, and he suddenly had a strong desire to talk. He immediately told his experience after leaving the Star Chess Sea in the ancient Desolation territory. Entering the Kunlun ruins to search for fortune, entering the starry ancient path to travel to various worlds, participating in the Tao discussion in the primordial world. He only talked about interesting things, and did not mention a word about the dangers he had experienced over the years. In all these years, this was the first time he had confided in someone. He was like a chatterbox, completely different from his usual self. He was only willing to tell Xia Ji about his worries. Xia Ji sat there quietly and didn't interrupt from beginning to end, but Lin knew that she was listening carefully. When she mentioned that she came to the dark world this time to help someone, Summer Solstice suddenly said, "A few years ago, someone saved me. That person mentioned you when he was talking to another person." As she spoke, she lightly flicked the tip of her finger, causing a screen of light to appear in midair, and it reflected the figures of Chen Linkong and the young man with the golden cicada. The two of them were standing in a gloomy and desolate world, discussing something. But in the blink of an eye, the light screen exploded and turned into nothingness. Summer Solstice wanted to condense another light screen like this one, but no matter how hard she tried, she was unable to succeed. "There's no need to try. I already know who they are." How could Lin not know the young man with golden cicada? At this moment, he finally understood the meaning behind the golden cicada young man's words. It turned out that Xia Ji had been in the dark world all these years, and he was the one who solved the problem for her. Thinking of this, Lin Sun felt guilty. He should have guessed it long ago. Xia Ji's voice was ethereal like the sound of nature. "Lin Sun, go on." "All right." Lin Sun nodded. Two people, one sitting cross-legged in the spacious castle, the other sitting cross-legged in the void in front of the castle. One talked and the other listened. In the distant starry sky, the stench of blood still pervaded the air, but those space beasts had vanished, and the starry sky had become tranquil and boundless. On the great wall, a group of old monsters was silent, thinking about their own thoughts. It was hard for them to accept that Lin Sun had miraculously survived the previous catastrophe. However, the appearance of Summer Solstice made them feel shocked and confused, and they needed time to laugh at her. As for their neighbor, Battle God Feng Ling, he naturally wasn't going to disturb the two of them at a time like this. That would only ruin the scene. After listening to what Lin Sun had experienced over the years, Xia Ji was silent for a moment before she said, "Lin Sun, I didn't expect that you had suffered so much these years." Her voice was a little low. Lin Sun was in a daze. He had carefully selected the things he had said over the years and only selected the good ones for Xia Ji to hear. But how could she hear the taste of bitterness? Xia Ji didn't look back, but her tone became extremely serious. "Lin Sun, don't use your wisdom to measure my feelings in the future. Besides, I'm not a child. I can feel what others don't know." Lin Sun was shocked, but he said with a smile, "Let's not talk about this. Tell me what you have been doing over the years, well, other than fighting." Xia Ji said, "Cultivation." "Nothing else?" "No." Xia Ji's answer was very calm, but it made Lin Sun silent for a long time. If she had been fighting and killing all these years, then, how many dangers and hardships had she experienced? "Why on earth did you do this?" he asked. Xia Ji pointed to the distant starry sky and said, "Those beasts came for you. What I have been doing all these years is to prevent them from finding you." Lin Sun's heart trembled. All these years, Xia Ji's battles were all for Lin Sun. This should have been an extremely touching thing, but Lin Sun's heart was full of unspeakable complex emotions. Ever since they were young, he and Xia Ji rarely got together, but every time she regarded him as more important than her life. How much did she pay for this silently? Lin Sun had never thought about these things seriously. He was always shocked by the powerful fighting power shown by Xia Ji, but he didn't know how much she had done for him behind his back. Looking at the graceful figure sitting cross-legged in the void in the distance, Lin Sun felt an unspeakable sadness and pity in his heart. "Don't do this again," Lin Sun said softly. Although his voice was light, it revealed a sense of firmness and inviolability. Xia Ji was silent for a moment and said, "If I don't do this, I won't be me anymore." Lin Sun was stunned and suddenly became a little angry. "You didn't listen to me since I was a child, and now you are still like this. I have long been a famous character in the starry sky. Why do I need your protection?" At this moment, Xia Ji turned around. Her eyes under the brim of the hat stared at Lin Sun, who looked exasperated, and the corners of her mouth rose slightly. "So what if you are famous in the starry sky? When you can defeat me, we can talk about protection." The light words made Lin Sun's expression stagnate. Even if he couldn't see Xia Ji's face under the brim of the hat, he was sure that the girl must be smiling, and her smile was extremely brilliant. "You!" Lin Sun felt helpless. Xia Ji stood up and walked in the void. "What are you going to do?" Lin Sun asked. "I almost forgot that the food can't be wasted," Xia Ji said, and began to wander in the starry sky, collecting the flesh and corpses of the alien beasts that had been hunted. Looking at her skillful technique, Lin Sun couldn't help asking, "Have you been replenishing your strength with the flesh and blood of these alien beasts all these years?" Xia Ji nodded. "From now on, I'll take you to eat all over the world. You can eat whatever you want, whether it's flying in the sky, running on the road or swimming in the water," Lin Sun said seriously. It suddenly occurred to him that when Xia Ji was with him, her favorite thing was to eat and sleep and eat. Xia Ji nodded again. She cherished her words like gold. But Lin Sun knew that this was already good enough. If it were someone else, Xia Ji wouldn't even bother to talk to them. 2 hours later, Lin Sun stood up from meditation. At this moment, his physical strength had recovered, and most of the injuries on his body had healed. It wouldn't take long for these injuries to completely recover. The previous battle gave Lin Sun the reward that belonged to the Great Wall, 55 beads of the origin. Each bead of the origin contained the pure power of the original order of the starry sky, which was of immeasurable benefit to the cultivation of the Emperor realm. It was not an exaggeration to call them treasures, because they couldn't be found in the outside world. Over the past 7 years, many of the Emperor realm cultivators stationed on the Great Wall had broken through to new cultivation levels with the power of the beads of the origin. One could imagine how miraculous the beads of the origin were. Lin Sun carefully put away these treasures and hid them in the castle. Xia Ji had already collected the flesh and blood of the alien beasts and handed them to Lin Sun through the air, forming a mountain of meat. Battle Emperor Feng Ling happened to see this, and he was so envious that he almost drooled. These were all rare ingredients. In the following time, Lin Sun extracted the precious blood of the alien beasts and planned to refine another batch of blood yuan pills. He made full use of the pieces of meat. He cut them into small pieces and skillfully skewered them with white bone skewers before using the miraculous Dao fire. Not long after, the aroma of roasted meat spread out. Every time he roasted a skewer, Lin Sun would hand it to Xia Ji through the air. Xia Ji's appetite was astonishing. She didn't eat very quickly, but a skewer of meat was quickly devoured. Seeing that she liked to eat, Lin Sun worked even harder. He squatted down and looked like a chef selling skewers on the street. The vast starry sky was quiet and empty. In front of the castle, Lin Sun roasted skewers while Xia Ji ate them. The two of them chatted occasionally, and the scene was indescribably beautiful. Even Lin Sun couldn't help but enjoy this atmosphere. "You won't leave again this time, right?" Lin Sun couldn't help but ask in the end. Xia Ji waved her slender and fair hand, and a skewer of roasted meat that was dripping with oil entered her mouth. She narrowed her eyes and chewed while saying, "There's no need to leave again." That's good, that's good. No matter where I go in the future, you can't leave again." Lin Sun immediately smiled. He was in high spirits, and his body and mind were happy. He worked even harder when roasting the skewers. "Lin Sun, those alien beasts are here for you. As long as you are here, this massacre will not end." Xia Ji, who was eating skewers, suddenly said, "Next, you have to prepare for battle. Why are those evil creatures here for me?" Lin Sun asked with a frown. He had almost forgotten this question. "They're here for your strength," Xia Ji said. "For them, your strength is like the strongest law of the Great Way in the world. Cultivators seek for immortality through cultivation, and so do these alien beasts. The only difference is that the Tao they seek is you. No wonder I, a mere quasi-emperor, have provoked the crazy attack of so many alien beasts on the Great Wall." After hearing this, Lin Sun's expression was uncertain. He was both shocked and surprised. After thinking carefully for a long time, he vaguely judged that those alien beasts were probably here for the talent power he possessed. The abyss devours the sky. Chapter 2268. Time flew by and a few days passed by. Lin Sun's injuries had completely healed, and he had refined over 600 blood yuan pills. He had also set up a lifeless killing formation and an incomplete, Tao-perishing heavenly death formation. While he was busy, Xia Ji had been guarding the void in front of the castle. She never felt bored or bored. The old martial emperors stationed at different parts of the Great Wall had gradually come to terms with the fact that they had calmed down over the past few days. With the mysterious woman who had traveled across the starry sky, normal beast tides could no longer threaten Lin Sun's life. This fact made many old martial emperors who were hostile to Lin Sun feel depressed, but they couldn't do anything about it. Only Battle Emperor Feng Ling was the happiest. Lin Sun had asked Xia Ji to bring him some roasted meat these days, and he ate with great pleasure. This further confirmed Lin Sun's speculation that this old guy was definitely a foodie. One day, Lin Sun arrived at the void in front of the castle and sat side by side with Xia Ji. Together, they looked at the starry sky in the distance. Lin Sun had tested that he could only move about 30 meters away from the castle. If he wanted to move more than 30 meters away, he would be blocked by the power of order. Xia Ji could only move about 30 meters away from the castle, but she had to endure the constant pressure from the power of order. Therefore, every once in a while, Xia Ji would stand up and guard the void 30 meters away from the castle. Only in this way could she avoid expending too much of her energy when fighting against the power of order. In other words, just sitting side by side like this was very precious. I wonder if those alien beasts really came from the other side. Lin Sun suddenly sighed. Summer Solstice said, "In my instincts, these alien beasts are endless, unless one day we can reach the Nirvana realm, you mentioned, and completely wipe out the parent body of these alien beasts." Mother? Lin Sun mulled over this word. "You can think of it as their ancestor," Xia Ji said after thinking for a while. It suddenly occurred to Lin Sun that when he left Xiao Empire for the Ancient Desolation in his youth, or when he returned to the Ancient Desolation after the end of the Forbidden Land, he had been threatened by an unimaginably huge and strange beast. That strange ferocious beast carried a myriad of stars as it traversed the boundless space. Merely its eyes were blood-red and terrifying like a pair of suns, and they emanated an icy cold, merciless, and terrifying divine glow. Compared to its huge body, The stars were like inconspicuous beads at that time. Lin soon even saw a pair of bright silver divine symbols burning in the depths of its eyes. They were obscure and icy cold, and they seemed to be able to swallow one's soul. They were extremely terrifying. Now that he thought about it, Lin suddenly realized a problem. Those alien beasts all came for him. Did it mean that the weird and fierce beast he met when he was young was also an alien beast of starry sky, and it also came for him? Could it be the mother of the alien beast? Lin Sun's black eyes flickered. The more he thought about it, the more doubtful he became. Suddenly, Xia Ji stood up, her robe fluttering in the wind. Her eyes under the brim of the hat gazed at the distant starry sky. Lin Sun, the situation is very bad this time. You should go back to the castle first, she said in a clear and clean voice with a trace of rare solemnity. Lin Sun looked up and gradually saw an ink-like black line appearing in the depths of the starry sky, which was spreading at an incredible speed. Wherever it passed, countless stars were submerged and disappeared. If one looked carefully, they would notice that the ink-like thing that stretched across the starry sky was surprisingly a variant space beast. There were so many of them that they were innumerable. It was as if the night had come and devoured the starry sky in the distance. Lin Sun couldn't help but gasp, and his pupils contracted. There were at least 1,000 alien beasts. My God! What is that? At the same time, the old monsters in various areas of the Great Wall were all alarmed by the scene. Their expressions changed, and they were all shocked by it. The appearance of more than 100 alien beasts can already be considered a large scale, but there are at least 1,000 of them now. It's over. How can we resist it? Many old monsters felt oppressed, and their hearts were heavy. Their hands and feet were cold. A beast tide of this scale was absolutely unprecedented, and it could make any martial emperor collapse. Wait, everyone, look, they're rushing in the direction of the survivors of Mount Heart and Heart. That's true. Ha ha, that kid is really unlucky. He almost suffered a calamity the last time, and this time, he provoked an even larger exotic beast army. I'm afraid that woman is finished this time. Many old monsters immediately laughed, and the depression that had accumulated in their hearts in the past few days was swept away. They were all in high spirits, and they were gloating. Everyone, don't you think it's strange that the alien beasts have their eyes on that kid? Could it be because it's very likely that he'll become a unique lotus on the path of the immortal supremacy? Some old monsters were surprised and bewildered. All of this was too abnormal and strange. As soon as these words were spoken, the hearts of many martial emperors shook, and they revealed different expressions. Indeed, such a scene was too abnormal, and they couldn't understand it. Him? A lotus that blooms by itself? Haha, I only know that this kid will definitely die this time. Someone sneered. Amidst the discussion, in front of Lin Sun's castle, Xia Ji held the white bone spear, and her whole body was suffused with a murderous aura that shot into the sky. Her figure was graceful, and her robe fluttered with dark shadows. In an instant, she seemed to have transformed into a dark god of slaughter. They really came for me. Seeing this scene, Lin Sun was finally convinced that Xia Ji was right. The alien beasts would not stop until they caught him. He took a deep breath and said, Xia Ji, take this opportunity to leave first. Quickly. His voice was filled with incomparable seriousness. But Xia Ji was indifferent. She stood in front of him and said, I've said that no matter who wants to harm you, they have to ask for my permission first. Moreover, they might not be a match for me. Her voice was ethereal, clear, and calm as ever, but there was an unquestionable tone to it. As she spoke, she raised the white bone spear in her hand and said, This spear was born to kill these alien beasts from the very beginning. Simply put, this spear is their natural nemesis. All these years, I've fought alone, and at least 8,000 alien beasts have died to this spear. This time, it's just that there are more opponents. Before she finished her sentence, She had already rushed out like a ray of dark light, rushing into the distant starry sky. She killed her way into the army of alien beasts alone. So direct, so decisive. Battle Monarch Feng Ling, who had been anxious and worried for a long time, saw this scene. He couldn't help but be dumbfounded when he saw Xia Ji charging out alone. Was she willing to die for that kid? An indescribable shock welled up in his heart, and Battle Monarch Feng Ling blurted out, "Silly boy, go and stop her." Lin Sun's expression flickered, and he clenched his fists tightly. But in the end, he didn't say anything. Xia Ji would never be dissuaded from making a custom order. Moreover, she was fighting for him this time. How could she listen to what he said? He knew her too well. Because of this, when he saw Xia Ji charging out, Lin Sun's heart suddenly surged with unspeakable anger. It was as if a volcano had erupted in his heart, and his whole body was trembling with anger. Since he started cultivating, he had become a famous figure in the heavens. His combat strength was unparalleled among his peers in the past and present, and he was truly invincible in this realm. But only now did he realize that even now, he still didn't have the ability to protect Xia Ji. On the contrary, she was fighting to her death because of him. For the first time since he started cultivating, Lin Sun was so angry at his own incompetence. In the distance, the power of order of the Great Wall was the first to stop the alien beast tide. It was like a raging tide, constantly attacking. The overwhelming alien beast tide suddenly became chaotic, and the invading formation was torn apart. Even so, many alien beasts took advantage of the chaos and rushed towards the castle where Lin Sun was. At this moment, Xia Ji also attacked, waving the white bone spear in her hand. Boom! The starry sky shook and roars resounded. Every alien beast was ferocious, and they crushed the void in a frenzy. Xia Ji's figure seemed so small as she rushed forward, but all the opponents she targeted were killed in an instant. Their bodies exploded and blood flowed everywhere. The white bone spear was like the spear of the god of death, so sharp and decisive that it reaped lives. But there were too many alien beasts, and some of them were incomparably strong, comparable to the 4th or 5th level of the Emperor realm. Xia Ji rushed forward alone, trying to stop them from approaching. It felt like an ant trying to shake a tree, or a mantis trying to stop a chariot. But she didn't seem to care at all. Her graceful figure was bathed in the storm of blood, and she didn't give way, and she didn't retreat. She's overestimating herself. This woman is really stupid. Does she really think that she can turn the tide by herself? Anyway, that Fangsuan Mountain's luck with women is not bad. Before he died, someone was willing to die for him. A series of sarcastic and gloating voices rose and fell from the Great Wall. Lin Sun couldn't hear them because they were too far away, but Battle Emperor Feng Ling could hear them clearly. In an instant, his face turned green with anger, and his lungs felt like they were about to explode. These old bastards, they were too much. Suddenly, Battle Emperor Feng Ling noticed that Lin Sun, who was standing in front of the castle, had a pair of bloodshot eyes, and his aura was showing signs of insanity. He just stood there, staring at the slaughter in the starry sky with a calm expression. But this kind of calmness made Battle Emperor Feng Ling's heart tremble. Because under this extreme calmness, there was extreme rage. Battle Emperor Feng Ling couldn't imagine what kind of torment and suffering Lin Sun must be feeling right now for him to be so angry. Chapter 2269. In the distance, Xia Ji was bathed in blood as she fought. Her lonely figure was so small and lonely, as if she could be crushed by the army of mutant beasts at any time. Everyone on the Great Wall was paying close attention to this battle. Many people were waiting for the moment when the moth that flew into the fire would fall. Many people were gloating. Many people were trembling. Many people, however, no one believed that the figure who had fought to the death alone would be able to survive. There were too many star beasts. Even though they had been dispersed by the power of order, there were still thousands of them. This number alone was enough to make anyone collapse and despair. But Xiaoji didn't care about this. All these years, she had been fighting alone. She had experienced dangers and trials of life and death alone. She was already used to fighting these star beasts. The word used contained a powerful force. Some people were used to being submissive, some people were used to running around for survival, and some people were used to being tortured by time and the world. But Xiaoji was used to fighting and killing. She wasn't stubborn. She wasn't born to fight. It wasn't that she didn't want to stop and rest. She was used to fighting for a person who was more important than her own life. She could die. But she couldn't watch him die. The starry sky shook and blood splattered everywhere. The aura of destruction was like a landslide and a tsunami, and soul-shaking roars and roars sounded one after another. She stood in front of the beasts, not like a moth flying into a flame, but like a moth trying to stop a raging fire. The mutant beasts howled and died one after another. They were torn into pieces, and their blood and flesh flew everywhere. However, compared to the huge number of beasts, their deaths were insignificant. The starry sky was like a bloody canvas. The chaos and turbulence made the canvas almost crumble. Her power was obvious to all. Even those who hated her had to admit it. But no one thought that she could survive. But it seemed like she didn't care whether she could survive or not. All she cared about was that he could survive. She must die. She's just struggling before death. Fighting for someone who is destined to die. In the end, everyone will die. How stupid. All kinds of gloating voices sounded from time to time. Battle god Feng Ling's face turned livid and blue veins popped on his forehead. He was extremely furious. He couldn't hold it in anymore and yelled, "Bastard! You still have the cheek to mock us?" There was a momentary silence on the Great Wall of 10,000 Paths. It was as if no one had expected that Battle Emperor Feng Ling from the dark yellow celestial court would scold them at such a time. "Old man Feng Ling, what does it have to do with you?" Someone frowned in displeasure. If Heavenly Emperor Shi were here, just based on this sentence alone, you, old man Feng Ling, and the black-yellow celestial court behind you would be in serious trouble. Someone said in a threatening tone. "You dare to criticize us for a remnant of Fangtsuan Mountain? Old man Feng Ling, who do you think you are? What gives you the right to be so arrogant?" Someone mocked, filled with disdain. "Old man Feng Ling, hurry up and shut up. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll become everyone's target once the 10 years are up." All sorts of voices sounded out. The old monsters were all furious. Being berated by Battle Emperor Feng Ling made them feel very uncomfortable. Battle god Feng Ling's face was filled with grief and indignation. His eyes were about to pop out of their sockets as he roared through gritted teeth. "You old fools still have the face to say such words?" Back then, in the all-sky chess match, who defeated the previous nameless D Venerable and made the starry sky path to the other side reappear? If it wasn't for the reappearance of the starry sky path, how could those old fools in your orthodoxies have the chance to go to the other side? It's fine if they don't know how to be grateful, but you can't kick them when they're down. His words were like a clap of thunder that spread out in waves, filled with incomparable anger. Ridiculous! Old man Feng Ling, in that all-sky chess match, do you know how many of our fellow Taoists died in the hands of the successor of Fangtsuan Mountain? Someone scolded Battle God Feng Ling with a cold voice. Battle God Feng Ling went all out and laughed hoarsely. "Ha ha ha, you bastards, you're used to being dogs. You don't know how to be human anymore. I'll ask you one thing. After that all-sky chess match ended, did the successor of Fangtsuan Mountain, who had won a complete victory, slaughter his way to your orthodoxies and destroy all of you? Don't tell me that Fangtsuan Mountain didn't have the power to destroy all of you." Taking a deep breath, Battle God Feng Ling's expression became a little gloomy. Indeed, when Heavenly Emperor Shi came, our heavenly court was forced to surrender in order to preserve our orthodoxies. He suddenly raised his head and looked around. His words were sonorous like a clap of thunder from the 9 heavens. But as a human, no matter how high your cultivation is, you still have to have a conscience and a bottom line. Look at you guys, all of you can't wait for a junior to die in the hands of that starry sky beast. Don't you feel ashamed? Don't you feel ashamed? Battle God Feng Ling's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His voice reverberated endlessly, but what he got in return was a burst of disdainful sneers. This instantly turned the grief and indignation in his heart into a bone-chilling coldness. He wanted to say something again, but he found that he was so powerless, because all of this was futile. Those old guys cared about the winner, not the conscience and bottom line. This was the way of the world. The struggle for the great Tao had always been cruel. In front of the castle, Lin Sun was so calm. His black eyes were bloodshot, so his eyes were like a pair of dark red abysses, which were full of burning anger. Finally, Lin Sun opened his mouth. His voice seemed to be squeezed out of his chest. Every word seemed to have the weight of 1,000 kilograms, and when he said it, it seemed so difficult. Xie Ji, I won't let you go. Come here, if you want to fight, let's fight together. His voice echoed in the starry sky, very calm. There was no heart-wrenching roar, no sorrowful and anxious cry, only a kind of determination, resolute and decisive. The graceful figure who was fighting in front of the beast tide trembled slightly. Just as she had said before, in this world, others might not understand, but she was the only one who could feel what he was feeling. So, she knew how hard he had suffered these years. Even so, when she heard this sentence, she only fell silent for a moment, and then turned back. She was dressed in black, surrounded by dark light and shadow. These years, she was used to fighting alone, because there was another person in her world. So, she was not lonely. She was not afraid of death, but at this moment, she was afraid that Lin Sun would be sad. For the first time, she felt that she was so important in Lin Sun's heart, as important as he was in her heart. Lin Sun smiled. In his bloodshot eyes, the beautiful figure was reflected. It was as if the vast starry sky did not exist. At this moment, his burning anger and fighting intent broke out at this moment, and he rushed forward. In the void of 30 meters in front of the castle, Lin Sun was like a boiling furnace, releasing all his Tao and power to the extreme. Xie Ji rushed to the other side and fought with him. Her breath became more and more fierce, and her white bone spear was stained with blood. No one noticed that there was a rare joy in her eyes under the brim of her hat. Boom! Alien beasts kept rushing over like a tide, like a dark sea of raging waves, slapping the defense line of the Great Wall, trying to drown the man and the woman in front of them. Roars that shook the heavens, a scarlet-red rain of blood, and the surging glow of the Tao filled the surroundings. They surged without end and surged through this expanse of the starry sky. This was the first time in Lin Sun's life that he was truly fighting alongside Xie Ji, and it was also the most dangerous battle he had encountered since he started cultivating. This kind of situation was enough to make anyone despair. Looking at the man and the woman fighting in the starry sky, battle god Feng Ling's heart was filled with an indescribable shock. Even his eyes were a little moist. Countless years had passed since he became a martial emperor, and it had been a long time since he felt tears welling up in his eyes. It was as if the softest string in the depths of his heart had been touched. Between life and death there was great terror. But the man and the woman were no longer afraid of death. So good, so good. Battle god Feng Ling's lips trembled. What joy was there in life, what fear was there in death? As long as they were together, who cared about anything else? So good. At this moment, battle god Feng Ling was a little envious of the two young people. He envied that they could fight, live, and die for each other. Blood poured down like a torrent in the starry sky. One after another, astral beasts comparable to martial emperors were killed. Their bodies exploded into pieces, and shrill cries rang out one after another. Gradually, Lin Sun and Xie Ji were both injured and panting heavily. Even though they had fought with everything they had, The army of astral beasts this time was not only large in number, but also fearless. There was no lack of terrifying characters comparable to fifth-level martial emperors. Not long after, Lin soon coughed up blood. His face was pale, and his clothes were already stained red with blood. He couldn't tell which blood was his and which was his opponent's. He glanced over and saw that Xia Ji was also stained with blood. Her robe was torn, and her exposed skin was covered in dark red wounds. She didn't say a word from beginning to end, and she was still as stern and fierce as ever. But Lin Sun's heart ached. This girl was clearly injured, but she was still fighting at the front and neutralizing most of the attacks for him. Almost all of those injuries were for him. Boom! Without hesitation, Lin Sun activated the lifeless killing formation. Huge green lotuses spread out in an overwhelming manner, blocking the front. But this time, the lifeless killing formation only lasted for less than a quarter of an hour before it exploded. The reason was that there were too many astral beasts, and some of them were even as strong as sixth-level martial emperors. Without hesitation, Lin Sun activated the Tao Perishing Formation again. Although the formation was incomplete, its power was terrifying. According to Qingying, this was a semi-finished killing formation deduced by Master Lu. It wasn't perfect, but its power was far greater than the lifeless killing formation, which was ranked 9th in all heavens. A terrifying scene of heaven and earth collapsing and 10,000 Daos dying appeared in the void. Endless array diagrams rumbled and dozens of galactic beasts were killed in a short period of time. But Lin Sun and Xia Ji didn't have much time to catch their breath. In just 10 minutes, the Tao Perishing Formation was destroyed. It wasn't defeated, but it withered due to the exhaustion of its power. The great Emperor Realm monsters on the Great Wall smiled, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Chapter 2270. The battle had been going on for 3/4 of an hour. It was dangerous, difficult, bloody, and filled with a depressing and despairing atmosphere. At least 300 alien beasts had died in the hands of Lin Sun and Xia Ji. Some of them were as powerful as 5th or 6th level Emperor Realm cultivators. Xia Ji had always been the one to kill them. Everyone knew that if it weren't for Xia Ji, Lin Sun wouldn't have been able to hold on until now. But now, the lifeless killing formation was gone, the Tao runes were gone, and even Xia Ji was heavily injured. The situation was precarious. The gloating voices were still ringing, and they were getting louder and louder. War Monarch Feng Ling could only watch helplessly despite his grief and indignation. But none of this seemed to affect the man and woman who were still bathed in blood. I've been injured more seriously than I am now, and the dangers I've encountered were more despairing. So don't worry that I can't hold on. Lin Sun was panting, and he squeezed out a smile on his pale face. As if he wanted to prove himself to Xia Ji, he charged forward even more fiercely. In fact, he was only worried that Xia Ji would protect him at all costs because she saw that he was seriously injured. All these years, I've been through at least 100 life-and-death battles, and more than a dozen times of silence and nirvana. At the worst time, I was only left with a broken body and a soul that was about to extinguish. Xia Ji's voice was clear and calm as before. So, don't compare yourself with me in this kind of thing. As she spoke, she waved the spear in her hand and pierced through the skull of an alien beast. Blood poured out like a tide. Lin Sun grinned. Compare what? How miserable. We are already miserable enough. As he spoke, blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Xia Ji was silent for a moment. It won't happen again. The aura around her became more and more severe. But Lin soon noticed that there was fresh blood flowing from her white right hand that was holding the bone spear. This made his heart tremble. The most troublesome and terrifying alien beasts were almost all killed by Xia Ji alone. How serious was the injury she had paid for this? She didn't say anything, but Lin soon couldn't tolerate this situation anymore. You know, the more I'm protected by you, the more uncomfortable I feel. I've been wondering when I can no longer stand behind you? Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun's bloodshot eyes were full of determination. Now I have the answer. From now on, I will stand in front of you forever. An indescribable horrible breath diffused from Lin Sun's bloody and wounded body. He turned his head and smiled at summer solstice. Remember, forever. Boom. As if he had completely broken one of his shackles, at this moment, Lin Sun completely released his cultivation to the utmost. It was like a cauldron that had experienced thousands of tempering, and it was boiling, burning, and circulating amidst this rain of blood and foul wind. This battle monarch Feng Ling shuddered and raised his head abruptly. He saw Lin Sun's tall figure burning like the sun, emitting boundless light. What is this kid trying to do? Breakthrough! What a joke! He was already on the verge of death, yet he still dared to break through to become a martial emperor? He doesn't know what's good for him. The old monsters on the Great Wall were all alarmed and noticed the amazing changes in Lin Sun's breath. Becoming a martial emperor. How many amazing and outstanding figures had been trapped by this word since ancient times? How many people had died while trying to break through to this realm? As experienced people, those old monsters of the martial emperor realm knew too well how terrifying and dangerous it was to become a martial emperor. Back then, when they tried to break through to the next realm, which one of them didn't make full preparations, not only did they have to be on guard, but they also needed many seniors to protect them, lest any accident would happen. Lin Sun, on the other hand, was already seriously injured and on the verge of death. In front of him, there was an army of strange beasts. In such a dangerous situation, he chose to break through to the next realm, which was no different from courting death. He will die if he doesn't break through to the next realm, and he will die if he breaks through to the next realm. His choice at this moment obviously proves that he is at his wit's end and has to fight desperately. An old monster sneered. Unfortunately, this is destined to be a struggle before death. Boom! While they were talking, the endless Great Wall, which stretched across the starry sky, suddenly trembled at this moment. In an instant, boundless dark tribulation clouds surged into appearance in the starry sky, and then the lethal aura of destruction that was interweaved with the obscure and unfathomable energy of calamity swept out. Howl! The army of strange beasts became restless. Their instinct of bloodthirst and killing made them feel endless fear. They released violent roars and escaped from this area one after another. They hid far away, not daring to approach again. But they didn't leave. Their scarlet and cold pupils were still staring at the place where Lin Sun was, ready to make a move. Lin Sun didn't pay attention to this. He said to Xia Ji, "No matter what happens later, you must not intervene, understand?" His voice was soft. Xia Ji looked up at the sky. The rolling clouds were as dark as ink, and the breath of catastrophe of order was rolling in it like a landslide and a tsunami. That kind of breath made her feel suffocated. After a moment of silence, she nodded and turned to the distance, standing in front of Lin Sun and the strange beasts. She knew that this was Lin Sun's tribulation. Even if the situation was extremely dangerous, she still couldn't allow any accidents to occur. Lin Sun smiled, took a deep breath, and stared at the sky. The clouds were surging like chaos, filled with the power of destruction, and seemed to be brewing something. At the same time, this expanse of the starry sky fell into a strange, deathly silence. It was so quiet that even the strange beasts didn't dare to make a sound. On the Great Wall, countless old monsters felt their blood run cold, and their hearts palpitated. The heavy clouds covered the starry sky, and they were as black as ink. It was like an eternal night, and it was oppressive to the point of suffocation. They'd broken through and become emperors in the past, but none of the heavenly tribulations they'd triggered were as horrifying as the one before them. No matter how high their cultivation was, their soul and state of mind felt extremely oppressive. Lin Sun stood alone. Although Zhou Shi was covered in blood and injured, He was ready to become an emperor in his strongest state in this expanse of the starry sky. Rumble, rumble, the oppressive sound of thunder started to resound from the depths of the clouds, and it was like the beating of a god's war drum. It struck directly at the heart, and it caused one to be on the verge of coughing up blood. It was the piercingly cold might of the heavens, and it represented the might of the heavens. Lin Sun's gaze was calm and emotionless. His body, mind, and soul were unprecedentedly concentrated, and he was like a spear that pierced through space and looked down proudly at the sky. Crack! Silver arcs of lightning that were over 3 kilometers long flickered in the clouds, and they tore apart the inky black clouds and illuminated the starry sky with peerlessly dazzling light. In an instant, the silver arcs of lightning struck Lin Sun, causing his body to tremble violently. This wasn't a technique, but true might of the heavens, and it was formed from the supreme quintessence energy of order. A large expanse of dazzling lightning enveloped Lin Sun. This was the aftershock of the lightning, and it spread throughout his body as if it intended to destroy his vitality. Lin Sun took a deep breath, and his body was like an abyss that instantly dispersed and crushed the energy of the lightning. He leaped up into the sky while his black hair fluttered in the wind. Rumble! The clouds of tribulation rolled, and thunder rumbled, causing the starry sky to tremble. In an instant, hundreds and thousands of lightning bolts descended. It was too violent, and they appeared in large numbers, directly drowning the place where Lin Sun was. Lin Sun resisted with all his strength, and he didn't dare to be careless. He operated the extreme power of the 3 paths of chi refining, body refining, and soul refining to kill. This could be called a peerless tribulation. If it were any other cultivator, they would have long been turned into ashes. Any lightning bolt could even seriously threaten the life of a cultivator in the Emperor realm. Because this was Lin Sun's tribulation, a supreme heavenly punishment that hadn't appeared since ancient times until now. Just looking at it from afar, the old monsters in the Emperor realm were aghast, and they didn't have the time to gloat because such a tribulation made them feel despair. It was too terrifying. It had almost never been seen since ancient times. No one dared to imagine that there could be such a terrifying tribulation in the world. Even further away, the army of alien beasts retreated a very long distance, and they even started to tremble, their scarlet eyes filled with fear. Such a heavenly tribulation left them in awe, and they felt despair. Only Xiaji stood there, her black robe fluttering in the wind. Her clear eyes that were brighter than the stars reflected the figure of Lin Sun, who was crossing the tribulation in the distance. No one cared more about Lin Sun's safety than she did. Rumble! Rumble! The sky and earth shook, and the thunder rumbled. In the depths of the tribulation clouds, the surging aura of tribulation seemed to have gone completely berserk. Thick, dazzling lightning bolts fell like divine whips, lashing the world. In just a moment, Lin Sun coughed up blood. His skin and flesh were torn, and his hair was disheveled. The lightning flowing on his body made him drip with blood, and he looked very miserable. But his eyes were still so firm, and his expression was still neither sad nor happy. He was like an indestructible spear, fighting against the lightning all over the sky. In the fight against the tribulation, he clearly felt a new force emerging in the baptism of the lightning, nourishing his injuries. All his pores were glowing, and the electric arcs were flashing. This was a kind of destruction, and also a kind of training, which made his body and mind be hammered. Lin Sun used to cultivate the great Quietus Thunder Scripture, and he had experienced countless killing tribulations before. Naturally, he knew very well that under the thunder tribulation there was great destruction, but also great nirvana. If he passed it, he could break through the realm, transform into a new realm, and embark on a higher road. If he couldn't pass it, his soul would be destroyed, and he would end up in ashes. Finally, Lin Sun breathed a sigh of relief. The violent bombardment of thousands of silver lightning bolts dissipated. He had passed it. However, Lin soon didn't have any chance to stop at all. In the depths of the ink-black tribulation clouds, a bloody light suddenly emerged, which was strange and dazzling. Shockingly, it was a blood-red tribulation lightning that had transformed into a dense mass of swords and sabers. Chapter 2271. Lightning surged and rumbled, causing even the starry sky to tremble. Scarlet-red arcs of lightning interweaved together and transformed into countless peerlessly sharp blades that flickered in the depths of the pitch-black tribulation cloud while emanating monstrous, killing intent. Tribulation into blades and swords, carrying out boundless heavenly punishment. An old freak was horrified and his scalp went numb. This type of incomparable phenomenon was undoubtedly too horrifying. Puff, puff, puff. Blades and swords that covered the sky descended, and they were dazzling and dazzling. They were formed from the supreme aura of the calamity of order, and they were filled with unimaginable destructive might. Lin soon tried his best to fight back. His combat power ran wildly and was pushed to the extreme. Even so, countless bloody wounds appeared on his body in the blink of an eye. His hair was disheveled and blood splattered everywhere. Moreover, a large area of his body was charred black, and even his hair was burnt. It was a horrible sight to behold. In the end, even his skin cracked like the earth, falling off piece by piece. Lin soon encountered a great crisis. This martial emperor realm tribulation was too strange and terrifying, it was beyond imagination. There's vitality within lightning, and it contains the essence of heaven and earth. If it's unable to be reborn amidst the destruction, then it'll definitely be completely annihilated. Lin Sun was fighting hard. As long as he could get through it, his body, mind, and soul would be stronger. However, this kind of training was too abnormal. If he made a mistake, his body and soul would be destroyed. He didn't dare to think too much. His will and mind were unprecedentedly focused as he faced the lightning tribulation and fought back continuously. Although his head was bleeding, he suffered heavy injuries, his body was charred black, and a large piece of dry old skin fell off. However, his spirit was highly condensed. There was a wave of extremely refined and pure power within his body that emitted a blazing radiance. This was like refining immortal gold, quenching the slag, washing away the impurities, and leaving behind the essence to forge the sharpest and most powerful weapon in the world. However, this kind of tempering was too dangerous. It was a walk between life and death. Even an ordinary Emperor Realm expert wouldn't be able to endure it. His body was in excruciating pain, and even his old skin was falling off. However, Lin Sun's spirit, chi, and spirit were even more resplendent. He had refined the purest source of energy and was growing stronger and stronger. The space between his brows shone brilliantly. A furnace shone, similarly deriving Tao and methods there, carrying out a similar type of refinement. This was a will Dharma idol. As long as his Dharma avatar was not destroyed, even if his physical body was destroyed, he could come back to life. Therefore, Lin Sun didn't panic when he saw his flesh and blood drying up and falling off, because inside, his muscles and bones were shining and his internal organs were boiling. His body was transforming. Finally, he sensed the vitality in the lightning waterfall. He opened his mouth and roared. Facing the blood-colored swords and sabers that filled the sky, he punched upward. At the same time, he soared up like a great abyss, swallowing the lightning. Boom! Heaven and earth rumbled, and lightning flashed endlessly. Lin Sun was undergoing an astonishing transformation. His body swelled, and his forehead shone brightly. Lightning constantly rushed into his body, changing his withered state. This was a wave of life force that allowed his flesh to regenerate. Purple chi came from the east, auspicious and vigorous. At this point, the second round of lightning tribulation, which had turned into blood-colored swords, dissipated, and the tribulation clouds in the sky fell into a brief silence. Lin Sun's figure stood in the air, and wisps of dazzling lightning flowed around his body. An astonishing vitality fermented in his body, quickly healing his injuries. In a trance, Lin Sun even had a feeling that he had taken the first step to becoming a martial emperor. He had undergone a miraculous transformation, and even the physical strength that he had expended in the previous battles had undergone an extreme transformation. Nirvana in the midst of destruction. He seemed to have comprehended something. In the distance, atop the great wall of 10,000 paths, all the old monsters were speechless. Their hearts trembled as they stared at Lin Sun's tall figure standing under the tribulation clouds. This was a once-in-a-lifetime, unparalleled tribulation, and he had withstood 2 rounds in a row. Good, very good. Battle God Feng Ling's lips trembled with excitement. He could tell that Lin Sun, who had resolutely become a martial emperor in the face of perilous circumstances, had already made a good start. However, this unprecedented tribulation of becoming a martial emperor was clearly not as simple as it seemed. Even battle god Feng Ling didn't dare to guess the final outcome. Xia Ji still stood quietly in the distance, clenching the white-boned spear. She was also taking advantage of this precious opportunity to heal her injuries. As for the huge army of exotic beasts further away, they didn't dare to approach this area at all. All of them were frightened by the aura of the tribulation and trembled in fear. All of this made Lin Sun not worry about being disturbed during his tribulation transcendence. The third round of thunder tribulation came unexpectedly fast. In less than a moment, stars suddenly fell from the sky. Each star was flowing with a dazzling silver luster. They weren't big, but they were densely packed like torrential rain. Looking from afar, it seemed as if the sky was collapsing and the earth was sinking, and thousands of stars were falling forever. Such a bizarre scene made many old monsters' hair stand on end. What kind of tribulation was this? Crack! When a star fell and rushed toward Lin Sun, there was a sudden burst of thunder and lightning. The thunder was deafening, and it was quite terrifying. This star thunder was very terrifying. When it exploded, the power of the thunder was like a landslide and a tsunami, and Lin Sun was directly smashed into the air. He coughed up blood. The power was too frightening. Lin Sun's eyes were full of solemnity. The power of the third round of thunder tribulation was much stronger than that of the second round. Rumble! Heaven and earth shook. One star after another, weighing more than hundreds of millions of caddies, kept smashing toward Lin Sun, drowning his figure. Every time it exploded, it produced unparalleled violent thunder and lightning, which hit Lin Sun's skin, flesh, tendons, and bones. His body, which had been repaired with great difficulty, was heavily damaged again and became broken. At the same time, the power of thunder entered his body, which was almost breaking him apart. Lin Sun took a deep breath. He knew that he couldn't go on like this, or he would die in this strange thunder tribulation. Slowly, his body began to glow, and then it became blazing. His blood and qi were rolling, and his masculinity was boiling. He did his best to release the potential of his body. His whole body was burning like a furnace, and in the end, he turned into a golden sun, which was incomparably blazing. Finally, Lin Sun rushed out of the dense star thunder, and his figure flashed as he swept into the distance. At this moment, the restriction from the power of the Great Wall was like nothing, and he easily moved to a distant place in the starry sky. He actually broke free from the restriction of the nirvana of freedom. What is he going to do? Countless people exclaimed in disbelief. It should be known that on the Great Wall, every emperor who was stationed there was restricted, and they couldn't leave the castle, let alone rush into the starry sky. But at this moment Lin Sun, who was in the middle of his tribulation, broke a layer of shackles. Rumble! The star thunder poured down, covering Lin Sun. No matter where he escaped to, he would be bombarded mercilessly. However, at this moment, the alien beasts were in trouble. Lin Sun rushed into the area where they were hiding, and when they realized what was going on, they saw countless star-like thunderbolts smashing toward them. For a moment there was a continuous wail. The bodies of the alien beasts were incomparably huge, and when they dodged, they were in a mess. They kept colliding with each other, and dozens of their bodies were smashed, and their flesh was charred, emitting green smoke. Although these alien beasts had no intelligence, they had instinctive awareness. When they sensed danger, they started to escape without hesitation. However, how could Lin Sun let them go so easily? His figure flickered as he chased after them. Wherever he appeared, there would be a mighty lightning tribulation, and the densely packed stars would explode, inflicting heavy damage on the army of alien beasts. In the span of a few breaths, over 100 alien beasts had been killed. Their bodies were all smashed into pieces, and they were annihilated in the blazing torrent of lightning. This scene caused the old monsters of the Great Wall to stare blankly, and they were all dumbfounded. In the face of such an unprecedented tribulation, this kid still dared to be so bold as to divert the disaster? He clearly didn't know what was good for him. However, even they had to admit that this was too cruel. Looking at the army of alien beasts fleeing in panic, they couldn't help but feel as if they were in a dream. Wonderful, wonderful! Battle Emperor Feng Ling was excited, and his blood was boiling. Using the heavenly tribulation to kill the enemy was a stroke of genius. Unfortunately, good times didn't last long. Lin soon encountered a serious threat, and he was once again engulfed by the descending star thunder. He didn't dare to be distracted again, and he focused on defending himself. He was injured. He was continuously injured. In the end, his body was completely destroyed, and he was completely submerged in the boundless lightning tribulation. This made Battle Emperor Feng Ling's heart skip a beat. He had been extremely excited just a moment ago, but now he was nervous and uneasy. Lin Sun's heavenly tribulation had changed too quickly. Xia Ji had been observing the entire time, and when she saw this scene, she took a step forward as if she was about to rush forward, but she restrained herself in the end. She could sense that Lin Sun's aura hadn't disappeared. Sure enough, after a short while, the surging torrent of lightning disappeared, as if it had been swallowed by a huge abyss. In the center of the torrent of lightning, a boundless rain of light swirled, and gradually, a figure was formed. It was Lin Sun. His body was like a bottomless pit, and he continuously swallowed the tribulation lightning. This scene completely subverted everyone's understanding, and their minds went blank. Since when could tribulation lightning be swallowed? This was simply infuriating. Since the beginning of time, such an unimaginable thing had almost never happened. Of course, the most intolerable thing for those old monsters was that such a terrifying and abnormal tribulation hadn't been able to kill Lin Sun. This made them feel suffocated. Boom! Soon, Lin Sun's figure was like a whale swallowing water, and he swallowed all the power of the tribulation lightning in the sky, leaving not a single drop behind. His whole body glowed, and it was so dazzling that it seemed illusory. His whole body was surging with waves of astonishing vitality, and his body was undergoing earth-shaking changes. This was nirvana in destruction. Although the third round of tribulation lightning was terrifying, and it almost killed Lin Sun. But at the last moment Lin Sun still withstood it, and he swallowed the vitality in the tribulation lightning, thus promoting his body to undergo a new transformation. Chapter 2272. In the world of darkness, Zhong Qiu and she appeared at the peak of a mountain peak that was as steep as a sword. The two of them had been waiting there for 7 years, either chatting briefly or looking into the distance in silence. To people like them, 7 years passed in the blink of an eye. It was no longer important. The aura of nirvanic freedom still lingered in the sky, but the entrance had already disappeared. Even with Zhong Qiu's power, he could not deduce what was happening in nirvanic freedom. "I've been wondering why you're so sure that Heavenly Emperor Shi won't return?" She could not help asking. After some thought, Zhong Qiu answered honestly, The ultimate ruin is one of the 4 Tao ruins. The taboo order power from the other side cannot invade it. After a pause, Zhong Qiu said disdainfully, since he can't borrow and control the taboo order power, Heavenly Emperor sure is nothing. If he enters the ultimate ruin, he will be disgraced even if he doesn't die. Although Zhong Qiu's words were crude, she immediately understood. What if he returns? She asked. Zhong Qiu said indifferently, the power of nirvanic freedom is formed by the starry sky's origin order. It can block the interference of the taboo order power. Even if Heavenly Emperor Sure returns, he will not dare to show himself. He can only endure and wait for the day nirvanic freedom disappears. Second senior brother had been extremely confident from the beginning. She could not help but ask, but what if he shows himself? Zhong Qiu stretched out a fist and said, if that happens, do you believe that I can smash his head with one punch? She could not help but be amused. This arrogant guy is still arrogant from the beginning. Boom. Suddenly, a dull thunder sounded in the sky. It seemed extremely faint, and most of the experts in the world of darkness did not even notice it. However, Zhong Qiu heard it, and his eyes immediately lit up. Over the past 7 years, he had been waiting for this thunderous sound. Has it begun? She asked. Yes, it has begun. Zhong Qiu seemed to feel a little nervous at that moment. He took a deep breath and said, I've been guarding the world of darkness for countless years, waiting for the sound of a flower blooming. The flower blooming was naturally referring to the lone lotus. She asked, is it really possible to become a martial emperor at the peak of the nirvana unrestrained heaven? Zhong Qiu fell silent for a moment before he said, do you still remember what I said? It was my master who paid a great price to deduce the secrets of nirvanic freedom heaven. Now the rebirth heaven has truly descended, and this undoubtedly proves that my master's deduction from all those years ago was correct. Therefore, the path of the deathless paragon definitely exists. Moreover, I have waited for countless years, and what I have waited for wasn't for nothing. In the end, his expression and words became incomparably firm. After a moment of silence, she said, but how can you be sure that Lin Sun is the lone lotus? Or perhaps, aren't you worried that this lotus will encounter an accident before it can bloom? You also said that some terrifying existences on the other side of the starry sky wouldn't allow the immortal paragon path to appear. It was not that she didn't think highly of Lin, but she didn't know what kind of disaster Lin would encounter this time. Zhong Qiu's eyes were cold as he looked into the distant sky and said softly, I only know that whoever wants to get involved and cause trouble will have to pay the price. Just wait. This great tribulation has already begun. The real show will begin very soon. Lin Sun could clearly feel that every time he passed through a tribulation of life and death, his body seemed to undergo a transformation. Every transformation allowed him to take a step forward on the path of becoming a martial emperor. Boom! After a brief silence, the 4th tribulation descended. Magnificent lightning appeared in the depths of the tribulation clouds. There were red, green, yellow, black, white, magnificent mountains and rivers appeared in the depths of the tribulation clouds. The mountains stood tall, the rivers flowed, and the grass and trees were green. It was a picturesque scene. However, the picturesque mountains and rivers were all formed by the tribulation of lightning. Every blade of grass and tree gave off a destructive aura. Just looking at it from afar made one feel despair and despair. Such a great tribulation completely exceeded the imagination of those martial emperors. No one dared to believe that this would be a great tribulation of becoming a martial emperor. Rumble! The mountains and rivers of lightning descended. In an instant, the starry sky shook and twisted violently. Xia Ji frowned and avoided it without hesitation. She sensed extreme danger. At this time, Lin Sun's figure was instantly covered in the mountains and rivers of lightning. The earth was vast, the mountains and rivers were undulating, and the peerless power of tribulation was everywhere. peerlessly sharp calamity sword chi gushed out from the plants, and the water of the great river swept up wantonly tribulation lightning. The lofty mountain remained motionless, but rocks transformed into lightning bolts that rained down from the sky. Every single rock formed from lightning bolts possessed the might to annihilate ghosts and gods. As soon as Lin Sun entered, he was bombarded by all kinds of attacks. No matter where he dodged, no matter how he moved, the mountains and rivers were like a prison, constantly bombarding him with endless killing tribulations. There was no way to escape, no way to avoid, and he could only resist. However, after 2 metamorphoses, Lin Sun was no longer the injured body he was in the beginning. Moreover, he was very sure that after a round of tribulations, his body would undergo a metamorphosis. Therefore, he didn't panic about being trapped here. All he had was boiling fighting spirit and unwavering will. He kept attacking, and even though he was heavily injured, he was extremely tenacious. In the end, his body was shattered again. People couldn't help but suspect that he would die at any time, and his soul would vanish. But in the end, after the mountains and rivers of lightning were destroyed, his figure condensed again in the torrent of destruction, as if he had been reborn. Not dead again? The great emperors felt like their chests were about to explode. Every time they saw Lin Sun on the verge of death, he'd miraculously come back to life. It was like being mercilessly slapped in the face again and again. It was too uncomfortable. Battle Emperor Feng Ling was also relieved, and his heart, which had been hanging in his throat, calmed down a little. The scenes of Lin Sun's tribulation were too thrilling, and his emotions fluctuated wildly, making him unable to control himself. Rumble! Lin Sun's chi was boiling, and he silently experienced all the changes in his body. In order to become a martial emperor this time, he had put in a lot of effort over the years. In the purgatory of darkness, he fought all the way to the 9th level, broke the forbidden formation of the Tao domain, and entered the forbidden zone of thunder and lightning. His mind, will, power of the Great Way, and martial power all reached an unprecedented level of perfection. In the previous samsara, he recultivated martial realm, gang spirit, spiritual sea, Tao insight, reincarnation evolution, king realm. It caused his cultivation to be completely flawless, and he could be ranked as number 1 throughout the ages and reign supreme over the world. Wasn't all the effort just for this moment? Few people in the past and present could set foot on the path of martial emperor, and not one could be found among thousands of martial emperors. But the emperor realm that Lin Sun was pursuing was far from that simple. His path of cultivation was nothing more than the 8 words, "From the past to the future, I am the only one." Soon, the 5th round of thunder tribulation came. In the depths of the tribulation clouds, palaces, pavilions, Taoist rites, altars, and other buildings emerged. They were magnificent and mysterious, and all of them were transformed by the supreme power of the tribulation. This stunned everyone. Since ancient times, almost all the martial emperors would suffer from 4 heavenly tribulations, also known as the 4-9 Emperors' tribulations. As long as one passed it, he could enter the threshold of the martial emperor realm and embark on the road of the great emperor. From then on, he could travel around the universe and look down on all the mountains. But at this time, Lin Sun broke the old convention. Fortunately, as long as the tribulation is still there, this boy will definitely be killed. Some old monsters gnashed their teeth and said, "Even the 4-9 Emperors' tribulations are not as terrible as before. This is very likely to be the tribulation of martial emperor." Some old monsters looked pale and their hearts trembled. It turned out that this boy wanted to become a martial emperor. Martial emperor? It's totally wishful thinking. Since the end of the Tao battle of the emperors in ancient times, no one has set foot on this road for 100,000 years. Someone said with certainty, "This boy is doomed to fail." While they discussed animatedly, Lin Sun's 5th wave of tribulation lightning had erupted, and it was even more formidable than the previous waves. In the end, Lin Sun's body cracked apart, his flesh and blood collapsed, and even his soul was shaken to the point of dimming. He didn't die. Those old monsters simply seemed as if they'd eaten a dead fly. They were both shocked and unable to accept this, and they were depressed to the point they were on the verge of coughing up blood. How could this be possible? How could he not be killed like this? Lin Sun didn't have the time to care about all of this at all. His mind was completely concentrated on overcoming the tribulation, and he didn't dare slack off in the slightest. He'd already noticed that it was very likely that this unprecedented tribulation wouldn't come to an end like this. In other words, there would be an unpredictable lethal threat that would occur next. Sure enough, Lin Sun was right. In the next period of time, the sixth wave of tribulation lightning descended from the depths of the tribulation clouds. Boundless lightning interweaved together and condensed into a lightning tribulation bell in the end. It floated in the starry sky, and the aftershock created by every single time it shook was capable of easily shattering Lin Sun's body, exploding his tendons and bones, and even his flesh and blood were destroyed. In the end, his Dharma image of will evolved into the shape of a cauldron, and he firmly guarded the clarity of the lightning tribulation bell. Outsiders couldn't understand the danger and terror involved in this tribulation. After experiencing this tribulation, Lin Sun was keenly aware that after this transformation, in addition to his body and cultivation that were a step closer to the Emperor realm, the most shocking change was in his soul. The Dharma image of will in his sea of consciousness was like a lifelike cauldron. After going through 100 hammering, mysterious Taoist patterns faintly emerged on the walls of the cauldron, which seemed to exist in substance and was indescribably magical. However, it wasn't over yet. In the depths of the tribulation clouds, the seventh wave of tribulation lightning was madly gathering and brewing. At this moment, all the Emperor Realm experts on the Great Wall were stunned. Even if they wished Lin Sun would be struck to death, they still felt an unprecedented shock and impact when they witnessed such a great tribulation. No matter who it was, they had completely concluded that what was happening in front of them was absolutely a great tribulation that had never been seen since ancient times. P.S. Send 2 consecutive updates first. Chapter 2273. Finally, the seventh wave of tribulation lightning turned into a bronze coffin. Lightning intertwined as if it could bury the heavens. When everyone saw this scene, great terror arose in their hearts. An unprecedented and incomparably great tribulation had actually transformed into a bronze coffin. This was undoubtedly too strange and terrifying, and it caused one's hair to stand on end. A coffin was used to bury the dead. This omen was filled with an ominous aura. Lin Sun couldn't help feeling astonished and surprised. But before he could react, the bronze coffin transformed by the tribulation thunder had fallen and covered Lin Sun's whole body. Bang! The lid of the coffin closed. At this moment, everyone felt as if the heavens were going to bury Lin Sun, this heaven-defying man. Battle Monarch Feng Ling's face turned pale. How could such a great tribulation be so ominous? Xia Ji was silent. Her clothes fluttered in the wind. She could only sense that Lin Sun's aura hadn't disappeared, but she couldn't know what kind of danger and terror he was experiencing. Haha, the heavens want him to die, so they chose this coffin as their burial ground. This is definitely the most special treatment in history. Some of the old antiques gloated. To encounter a bronze coffin falling from the heavens during a tribulation was a great omen. The other martial emperors also looked around. Even the heavens couldn't bear to see this savage survivor of Mount Fangtsuan be killed. Dong! But soon, a violent rumbling sound came from within the bronze coffin. Then, the bronze coffin shook violently. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. He was already trapped in the coffin, but he wasn't dead? Dong! 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 In the following period of time, dull sounds came from the bronze coffin. The starry sky trembled, and the expressions of the old monsters changed. Boom! Finally, a hole was blasted open in the bronze coffin. A broken figure staggered out from within. His bones could be seen, and he was on the verge of death. But he was still alive. The eyes of the old monsters almost popped out of their sockets. They felt their faces burning. Ever since Lin Sun began his tribulation, every time they were sure that Lin Sun would die, the reality was like a merciless slap in the face. This wasn't a slap in the face. This was a slap in the face. What battle god Feng Ling was concerned about was Lin Sun's aura. It was completely different now, and it was even more terrifying than the average Emperor stage cultivator. His body appeared to be covered in blood, but the aura emanating from his body was so terrifying that even battle god Feng Ling's heart trembled. The most incredible thing was that the peerless Emperor's tribulation for Lin Sun showed no sign of ending. Dumbfounded, battle god Feng Ling's mind was completely blank. The only thing he was sure of was that even if Lin Sun failed in the end, this unprecedented Emperor's tribulation would be recorded in history and be remembered by future generations with Lin Sun's name. Lin Sun gasped for breath and stared at the sky with his deep eyes. His body was undergoing an inconceivable transformation. The great tribulations from before were like rebirth and rebirth, making him completely different from before. But even then, Lin Sun felt even more oppressive and heavy. This calamity of Zhu Ying's advancement into the Emperor realm simply intended to annihilate him, and it didn't intend to give him a chance to survive at all. In the starry sky, there was an oppressive and suffocating atmosphere. The ink-like tribulation clouds tumbled, and without a sound, a Taoist seal condensed. Rumble! The lightning that filled the sky seemed to be drawn in at this moment, and all of it surged madly into the Taoist seal, causing it to become more and more solid, more and more resplendent, and it emanated an aura of destruction that could suppress the ages. Finally, a mysterious tribulation word appeared at the bottom of the Taoist seal. The old monsters felt their souls tremble, and they cried out in alarm. "What kind of great tribulation is this?" Tribulation Taoist seal executes heavenly punishment, punishes life and death. Everyone was unable to remain calm, and they fell into a state of shock. The bronze coffin was already terrifying enough, and now, a tribulation Taoist seal had appeared. Not to mention ordinary Emperor realm cultivators, even those old monsters with profound cultivations felt their hair stand on end. If they were placed in this situation, they would definitely feel despair and find it difficult to resist. This was no ordinary tribulation lightning, but a Taoist seal condensed from the tribulation lightning that filled the sky, and all of the power of heavenly punishment was condensed within it. Boom! The Taoist seal descended, and Lin Sun, who was beneath it, had no way to dodge. He had already been locked onto, and in an instant, his skin and flesh were lacerated and his bones were broken. How terrifying was the might of all the tribulation lightning that had condensed and blasted into his body? Puff! In a flash, the space between Lin Sun's eyebrows split open, and blood splashed everywhere. The Dharma form that had turned into the furnace was shaken out. Then, the Dharma form of the willpower was also impacted, which put Lin Sun in the most dangerous situation all of a sudden. This was the 8th round of heaven's tribulation, which was like a purgatory of destruction. A Taoist seal bloomed with immeasurable killing tribulations. Lin Sun's body was broken, and his spirit was also cracked. He was like a candle in the wind, and his soul was in danger of dispersing at any time. Heal! Lin Sun roared and ran the Great Way furnace scripture. All kinds of great ways roared and burned, and he did his best to repair his injured body and Dharma form of the willpower. It had to be said that Lin Sun was extremely powerful at this time, and he could already be the best among his peers in the past and present. What he sought was the most unprecedented way. His body, which had originally been torn apart, and his flesh and blood gathered again, growing and repairing. But it didn't take long for the Taoist seal to strike him, and with a bang, his body was smashed again, and his Dharma form of the willpower trembled violently. Lin Sun roared. He had been forced to the edge of life and death, but he still didn't give in. He exhausted all means to resist, and once again condensed his body and reassembled himself. But it didn't take long for his flesh shell to crack again and again, and his spirit to be torn apart. This scene was a bit horrible. Lin Sun was tortured in 1,000 ways. Over and over again, Lin Sun suffered misfortune here. His body and his spirit were almost destroyed. However, it could also be seen that his flesh and blood were dim after the repeated impacts, but there was an indescribable aura pervading his body. The same was true of his spirit. This was a kind of refinement. Although he might be killed, if he survived in the end, he might go to a higher level and become stronger. Lin Sun gritted his teeth and fought against heaven's tribulation unyieldingly. He had never been so embarrassed. He didn't know how many times his flesh shell was shattered. Every time, he was about to fall and die. That kind of torture alone could make anyone in the world collapse. Everyone was in a daze, watching Lin Sun's figure being constantly smashed and reassembled, and constantly fighting against the tribulation. They were all in shock. Even Xia Ji was extremely nervous. She was suffering an unprecedented torment in her heart. Watching Lin Sun suffer the destruction of life and death, her eyes were bloodshot. Her graceful figure trembled slightly, as if she could not bear it. Boom! Later, with an earth-shattering explosion, the Taoist seal that gathered the power of tribulation thunder all over the sky was broken, bursting out endless torrents of thunder and lightning. Lin Sun's figure was immediately submerged. Many people jumped up in shock, stood at the highest place, and looked forward. All of them widened their eyes. Is he dead? His flesh has been blasted into powder, primordial spirit also scattering, turning into an expanse of fiery light. He is definitely going to die. No, he in the void, the torrents of thunder and lightning were swallowed up by the wind, and then countless fine flesh and blood powder gathered and condensed again, gradually turning into Lin Sun's tall figure. He was still alive. On the great wall, old monsters breathed heavily, and their eyes were red. How could this guy not be killed? How could it be? How could it be? But no matter how unwilling and unacceptable Lin Sun was, it was a fact that he survived the 8th round of tribulation. At this moment, the starry sky was dead silent. Lin Sun took a deep breath and looked at the sky with his black eyes. There was never a trace of retreat or wavering in his heart. On the contrary, after experiencing so many killings, his state of mind and will reached an unprecedented level of tenacity. His body and soul were destroyed, but he had nothing to fear. As long as there was a trace of his will, he would fight to the end. In the sky, the tribulation clouds roared and rolled, and the 9th round of tribulation came. Unlike before, the tribulation lightning this time transformed into a beautiful and brilliant decree that spread out in midair. The decree was covered in obscure Tao markings formed from the energy of the tribulation lightning, and they wriggled like earthworms. This was like a decree of the heavens, and it was filled with the supreme dignity of the heaven Tao. The breath it emitted made the starry sky fall into a strange silence. There was no sound, but it made people feel extremely depressed. Some old monsters were sweating, their knees were weak, and their Taoist heart was showing signs of collapse. It was too horrible. No one could have thought that the 9th round of tribulation was condensed into a supreme decree. What was recorded on it? But no matter what it was, everyone realized that this tribulation was more terrible than the seal of tribulation. Lin Sun looked unprecedentedly calm. This was the 9th round of tribulation, which reminded him that 9 was the extreme number, and 9 returned to 1. Among the 50 great ways and 49 heavenly evolutions, one escaped. If calculated carefully, there were exactly 9 realms from the martial realm to the emperor realm. And Lin Sun was facing not only the 9th round of tribulation, but also the 9th realm on the road of Tao. 9 returned to 1? 1 escaped? And there was only 1 lotus on the road of immortality. Somehow, there seemed to be a magical fit. The heavens and the earth were deathly silent. The supreme decree formed from the tribulation lightning was enshrouded with a terrifying aura of destruction, and the striations of the Tao that were like earthworms flickered within it. The aura it emanated caused this expanse of the starry sky, and all the living beings in this expanse of the starry sky to be terrified. Whether it was the alien beasts in the distance, the old monsters on the Great Wall, or Xia Ji standing alone in the distance, they all felt an inexplicable palpitation at this moment. It was a kind of uncontrollable fear from the depths of their souls. In the dark world, Zhong Qiu took another deep breath. This was the second time he had done this, but he didn't realize it. His eyes were fixed on the sky, and he said, "This lotus is about to go through the tribulation of death and bloom. Will it wither or will it be immortal?" Speaking of this, he was silent for a moment, and then he said, "I believe that Master is not wrong, and I also believe that Junior Brother will not let us down." She stood there silently, waiting in silence. P.S. More updates are sent. The WeChat official account of Golden Fish will push some articles for this climax. For those who haven't followed, please open WeChat and search for the official account, Xiaojinyu 233. Every day at 10 o'clock in the morning, some secrets, analysis, and spoilers will be pushed. Chapter 2274. The decree floated in the air, suppressing the starry sky. In the deathly silent atmosphere, some old monsters suddenly noticed that the power of order covering the Great Wall was disappearing rapidly. "What's going on?" No, the power of order belonging to the starry sky didn't disappear, but was absorbed by the decree condensed in the thunder tribulation. Soon, a series of exclamations could be heard. Many old monsters stationed in the castles discovered that the power of order covering the Great Wall was surging from all directions and gathering toward the decree under the heavenly tribulation. As it swallowed the power of order, the shining decree became more and more dazzling, and its aura became more and more terrifying. Vaguely, the earthworm-like Taoist patterns in the decree showed the shape of a lotus, waiting to bloom. Eternal tribulation of oblivion, a single lotus blooms. A senior howled loudly with a hoarse voice while his eyes turned red. These survivors of Mount Innerheart aren't just attaining the absolute emperor tribulation, they intend to seize the greatest fortune in the rebirth of Freedom Heaven, and they intend to become a lotus that blooms all by itself. How is that possible? The other old monsters all changed their expressions, all of them were angry and agitated. This time, they'd come from the starry sky and entered the rebirth of freedom in unison, and they'd sought the supreme fortune related to the path of the eternal exalt. It was said that as long as one became a single lotus, he would have the immortal and invincible emperor foundation. Even if it was a kind of foundation and not a real fighting force, it was enough to make any emperor crazy to fight for it. But now, after being stationed at the Great Wall for 7 years and experiencing danger and slaughter, they were finally able to witness the appearance of this unparalleled good fortune. However, all of this seemed to have no fate with them. What caught them off guard was that no one expected that this supreme good fortune would appear in the 9th round of thunder tribulation of Lin Sun's desperate attempt to become a martial emperor. It must be the supreme fortune, like a supreme decree, that drains the power of order of the starry sky of the Great Wall. Whoever gets it will have the immortal supreme foundation. Someone roared and became irritable. In fact, at this moment, all the old monsters in the Emperor realm on the Great Wall were about to go crazy. This supreme fortune appeared in Lin's tribulation. How could they fight for it? Charging into that peerless calamity was no different from courting death. If I can't get it, then the rest of the Fangtsuan Mountain won't get it either. An old monster from the godly illuminating ancient sect said coldly, full of hatred. Whoosh! In the next moment, his figure flashed and actually flashed out of the castle, and he wasn't restrained any longer. This surprised him, but he was soon overjoyed. He looked up to the sky and laughed. The heavens are helping me. Lin Sun, you will die this time. Before his voice died away, he had already rushed to the castle area where Lin Sun was. At the same time, on the endless Great Wall, many old monsters rushed out and rushed to the place where Lin Sun was going to pass the tribulation. They had already realized that the power of the decree lightning tribulation had drawn away the power of order that covered the Great Wall, causing the restraining power of the Great Wall to disappear. At the very least, they could leave the castle they were guarding and rush to any place in this vast starry sky. Lin Sun, you will definitely fail the tribulation this time. Even if you survive, with so many cultivators here, do you have a chance of survival? Let's go. In an instant, divine rainbows rained down from all directions, and the figures of the Emperor Realm old monsters were all moving at full speed. All of them were filled with murderous intent and mighty power. Battle Emperor Feng Ling's expression changed, and he didn't have time to pay attention to Lin Sun. He rushed out without hesitation and arrived in front of Lin Sun's castle. He said quickly, "Young friend, the situation is not good. Hurry and let this lady leave, or those old things will definitely attack together to capture this lady and force you to submit." The 9th round of lightning tribulation had been accumulating power and hadn't descended yet. This was undoubtedly the most fatal threat. If Lin Sun was distracted because of Xia Ji, the consequences would be unimaginable. Lin Sun's eyes were indifferent as he glanced at the emperors who were rushing over from different areas, and finally looked at Xia Ji in the distance. Xia Ji grasped the white bone spear, and her clothes fluttered in the wind. She said softly, "Just focus on passing the tribulation. Don't worry about me. They can't kill me." With that, she turned and walked into the depths of the starry sky. There were still many astral beasts lying in wait, waiting for the tribulation to end before continuing to attack Lin Sun. When they saw Xia Ji walking over, the crimson eyes of these astral beasts flickered incessantly, as if they were ready to attack. However, when Xia Ji stopped not far from them, they calmed down. Seeing this, Lin Sun was reassured. Xia Ji wasn't a child. She immediately made the wisest decision. If those old monsters dared to attack her, even if she couldn't defeat them, she could still charge into the horde of astral beasts and borrow their strength to fight. Of course, this was also extremely dangerous, but compared to facing the threat of those old monsters, there was still a chance for her to turn the tables. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Soon, the old monsters of the Emperor Realm arrived. There were hundreds of them, and the strongest among them was a 6th-level emperor, while the weakest was a 1st-level emperor. Every stomp of their feet was a supreme existence that could shake the heavens. However, when they arrived, they avoided the lightning tribulation area and didn't dare to approach. "That woman is really cunning. She's hiding over there." Some of the old monsters who had planned to capture Xia Ji as a hostage couldn't help but frown when they saw Xia Ji standing near the astral beasts in the starry sky. They gave up the idea of capturing her. "Lin, you've seen the situation before you. Even if you pass the tribulation successfully, there are hundreds of people nearby who will kill you immediately. Besides, there are many astral beasts in the distance. What can you do to struggle? Give up," someone shouted. It was a dignified ancestor from the untainted Taoism court. He was called the Hidden Flow Emperor of War and was a 6th-level emperor. He was very dignified. As soon as he spoke, the other emperors followed suit. Some sneered, some made sarcastic remarks, some threatened, and some took pleasure in Lin Sun's misfortune. Those words, coupled with their cold expressions, could indeed scare an ordinary person out of their wits and cause them to be at a loss of what to do. But Lin Sun turned a deaf ear to them. He didn't even look at them. His state of mind and will were heavy like iron, and they remained unchanged throughout the ages as he stared at the decree beneath the tribulation clouds while accumulating strength and waiting. he could tell that the strange changes happening to the Great Wall of Myriad Paths had something to do with the lotus-shaped Dharma decree tribulation lightning. It was extremely likely that this truly was that undying supreme type of supreme good fortune. Lin Sun's attitude of disregard made the old monsters' faces turn gloomy. But no one dared to step forward and destroy it for fear of being affected by the tribulation. Just you wait. Whether you pass the tribulation successfully or not, you'll definitely die. Someone gnashed his teeth. Rumble! An earth-shattering rumble suddenly broke the oppressive atmosphere in the starry sky. The power of order on the Great Wall dimmed, as if it had lost all its power. At the same time, the decree tribulation lightning flickered in the sky and emitted an obscure aura. It seemed like it was going to destroy the starry sky. It was too terrifying. At this moment, Lin Sun stepped into the void and took the initiative to rush towards the decree tribulation lightning. His body shone brilliantly. Vaguely, he seemed to have transformed into a great abyss that was going to swallow the entire sky, including the decree tribulation lightning. Countless people's eyes widened at this scene. And it was also at this moment that someone suddenly said in a gloomy voice, "Little bastard, do you really not care about that woman's life or death? Kill someone's heart." What this sentence revealed was an extremely cruel threat. After I, Lin Sun, become an emperor, I'll definitely destroy your entire family. Lin Sun finally spoke in a calm voice that resounded through the starry sky. The person who spoke before was a white-robed man with an extraordinary appearance. He was an ancestor of the Kong clan of the far ancient Imperial clan, and he was called Sword Emperor of Cloudlight. Hearing this, he was not angry but happy. This proved that Lin Sun did not care about that woman, and that woman was enough to threaten him and make him lose his mind. The other old monsters also guessed this. Their eyes flickered, and they began to think quickly about whether they should deal with Xia Ji at this time. Rumble! At this moment, Lin Sun had transformed into a great abyss and released his full strength, swallowing the decree tribulation lightning in one fell swoop. Countless people felt their scalps go numb. They were shocked by Lin Sun's extremely audacious action. Swallowing the tribulation lightning? Since ancient times, who had ever seen such a reckless person who crossed the tribulation? Boom! The heavens and the earth shook and the tribulation clouds rolled. The tribulation aura seemed to have been provoked, and it produced a terrifying and boundless aura of destruction, causing the starry sky to show signs of collapsing and collapsing. The old monsters in the Emperor realm did not hesitate to flee far away. The aura of destruction was too terrifying, and they immediately felt that it was a fatal threat. If they were to be affected by it, they would definitely die. At the same time, they saw Lin Sun, who had swallowed the decree tribulation lightning, glowing all over, and the terrifying sound of thunder surged out from his body. In just an instant, his flesh and blood exploded, his tendons and bones shattered, and even his head was instantly smashed into pieces. He was drowned in the blazing and resplendent tribulation lightning. The tribulation lightning could faintly be seen floating in the sky. It was boundless and radiated supreme power, but Lin Sun's figure was no longer there. Did he die just like that? Everyone's eyes widened. In an instant, Lin Sun's figure exploded, and the tribulation lightning emerged from his body. It was clear how abnormal the 9th round of tribulation lightning was. In reality, even a 6th-level emperor like Battle Monarch Song Lu felt his blood run cold and his heart palpitate. The power of the tribulation lightning was so great that even they would not be able to withstand it. Battle Monarch Feng Ling's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. How was this possible? He was only one step away. Could it be that his state of mind had been affected, and he had unfortunately died? Only Xia Ji, who was far away, remained unmoved. She could clearly feel that Lin Sun was not completely dead, but his situation seemed to have become extremely unfavorable. Chapter 2275. Lightning rolled, dazzling and brilliant, illuminating the starry sky. The tribulation lightning that was like a decree floated up and down, emitting a destructive aura that caused the space in that area to collapse and rumble. It was too terrifying, as if it could not be shaken, full of a forbidden supreme aura. But what made all the old monsters feel strange was that after Lin Sun's figure exploded, the decree lightning tribulation did not dissipate. This is the first fortune related to the immortal supremacy since ancient times. How could it disappear just like that? Some old monsters looked excited. Lin Sun was dead, but they were still alive. Whoosh! All of a sudden, a figure rushed out and sent a palm strike towards the decree lightning tribulation. Obviously, this Emperor Realm old monster could not hold back and wanted to fight for this supreme fortune. But a strange scene appeared. His palm collapsed in an instant, and at the same time, an obscure destructive aura turned into a divine chain that swept out from the decree lightning tribulation. Crack! The Emperor Realm old monster's body exploded, his soul shattered, and he was completely annihilated. This scene of death caused the others to tremble. The greed that had just emerged in their hearts was instantly extinguished, replaced by a touch of coldness. In an instant, an Emperor Realm old monster's soul was destroyed. Who dared to fight for it? And at the same time, an illusory figure gathered from the rolling lightning tribulation light, turning into a furnace. Boom! The furnace glowed, suppressing the decree lightning tribulation. It's him, the little bastard is still alive. Someone exclaimed. The old monsters present also saw this, and they were all dumbfounded. This kid was still alive. This was indeed incredible. Everyone saw his figure explode, his head destroyed, and he completely dissipated. But now, he was alive again. Rumble! Under the rolling tribulation clouds, the furnace seemed to be boiling, rumbling. Vaguely, the furnace could be seen around the furnace, deducing all kinds of methods, constantly suppressing it, showing a kind of power that could suppress the past, present, and future. But the decree lightning tribulation was too terrifying, and in a flash it smashed the furnace, causing it to explode. The tribulation was indeed too terrifying. Anyone else who had achieved the martial monarch realm would have died a long time ago. Seeing this scene, before those old monsters came to their senses, they saw Lin Sun's figure reappear again. His body was intertwined with the mysterious light rain of the rules, once again turning into the form of the furnace of the great path, swallowing the decree lightning tribulation and suppressing it. Rumble! Rumble! The heavens and the earth shook, the light of catastrophe penetrated the starry sky, and the turbulence of destruction swept out. The furnace that Lin Sun had transformed into rolled and shook violently, just like a straw in the raging waves. However, even then, he still persisted and used all his strength to suppress it. Life and death, pain, thoughts, all of them were gone. Right now, he only wanted to suppress and refine this tribulation. Even if he was killed to the point where only a sliver of his consciousness remained, he would not give up just like that. The emperors here were all stupefied, finding this hard to believe. This was something a youngster who hadn't even truly become an emperor could do. Boom! Unfortunately, a moment later, Lin Sun's figure that had transformed into a furnace exploded again, shattered by the decree lightning tribulation, and disappeared in the light of catastrophe that filled the sky. He should be completely dead now. At this moment, some of the old monsters didn't dare to be sure. They had been slapped in the face too many times, to the point that they couldn't help but doubt themselves. Say, even if he can really survive this tribulation, how long do you think he can live? Someone asked slowly. Many old monsters couldn't help but laugh when they heard this. So what if he succeeded in overcoming the tribulation? With hundreds of emperors by his side, and the group of alien beasts in the distance watching him covetously, how long could he live? But if he's still alive, doesn't that mean that he has obtained the supreme creation? Someone frowned. How can he use this kind of creation in a short period of time? "We'll just take it," someone said slowly. For a moment, these old monsters calmed down quite a bit. "He really isn't dead." Suddenly, someone shouted. Everyone looked over and saw Lin Sun's figure condense again from the boundless light of catastrophe and appear. He had transformed into a furnace and was suppressing the decree lightning tribulation again. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other in shock. Lin Sun's indestructible performance even frightened them. They didn't dare to imagine what kind of power it would take to achieve this step. "No, we can't just watch like this." Suddenly, the cloud-light sword emperor from the immemorial imperial clan, the white-gowned man who had threatened Lin Sun with Xia Ji earlier, spoke. With a gloomy expression, he said, "I would like to ask, who among the people present is willing to join me in capturing that woman?" As he spoke, he looked at Xia Ji in the distance. "I'll lend a hand, Brother Kong. How can I be left out of such a wonderful thing? If we capture that woman, we can definitely threaten Lin Sun and make him panic." Immediately, dozens of emperors stood out, each with a monstrous aura and a boundlessly terrifying aura. Seeing this, Cloud Light Sword Emperor couldn't help but be excited and sneered. "Lin Sun, this time, that woman will die because of you." As he spoke, he teleported into the void and charged towards Xia Ji with the dozens of emperors in an overbearing manner. Despicable, too despicable. Battle Emperor Feng Ling's veins were bulging and his eyes were bloodshot. He tried his best to control the raging anger in his heart and didn't stop them. Fighting alone was no different from courting death. What's more, Xia Ji was so powerful that she could even kill astral beasts that were comparable to 5th or 6th level emperors. How could she be so easy to deal with? Boom! The starry sky became more and more turbulent. Lin Sun's figure that had transformed into a furnace was once again destroyed, but it quickly reformed and continued to suppress Xia Ji. Again and again, it was destroyed and suppressed, as if it would never stop. However, who would know the dangers that they would have to go through in the process? At the same time, in the distant starry sky, the encirclement against Xia Ji also broke out. Xia Ji didn't flee. Instead, she chose to fight alone with her white-boned spear. She faced dozens of emperors alone. These weren't astral beasts with no intelligence. These old monsters had mastered the great Tao laws and all sorts of supreme combat technique. They were far more threatening than astral beasts of the same level. For example, an astral beast that was comparable to a first-level emperor would be no match for a true emperor cultivator in a real battle. What no one expected, however, was that several great emperors were killed the moment the battle began. Xia Ji's fighting style was still as simple and efficient as ever. She charged with her spear and set off a storm of blood. She killed 2 second-level emperors and 1 third-level emperor. None of them could withstand a single strike from her. Their chests were pierced, their heads were smashed, and their bodies were split in half. The bloody scenes of death caused the faces of dozens of emperors to change. Only now did they suddenly realize that this woman had once relied on a single spear to help Lin Sun turn the tide and slaughter the exotic beast army. "She's alone. How can she be a match for us? Everyone, please don't be frightened." Cloud Light Sword Emperor shouted and rushed forward with his sword in the starry sky. "Kill!" Those old monsters also attacked Xia Ji together. They were extremely vigilant and cautious. They planned to take it slow and didn't dare to risk their lives. It was a pity that no one knew how angry Xia Ji, who had been unable to help Lin Sun after witnessing all the dangers and killings he had experienced during the tribulation. She had nowhere to vent her hatred and killing intent. But Cloud Light Sword Emperor and his people rushed forward. Xia Ji found an outlet to vent her anger. She attacked angrily. She needed to vent her anger. Otherwise, she doubted that she could bear the torment. How powerful was a furious Xia Ji? What happened next made the great emperors deeply understand what it was like to be a part of. In a flash, Xia Ji Ho charged forward with an unstoppable momentum. She killed 7 opponents in succession, causing flesh and blood to splatter all over the place, causing countless cries of alarm. No one expected that Xie, who was besieged, could still be so powerful. They were emperors from all the forces in the starry sky. Each of them was supreme enough to overlook all living beings. But in front of Xie, they were as weak as chickens and dogs. Only those above the 4th level of the Emperor realm could compete with Xie. But even the 5th level of the Emperor realm couldn't suppress her. This caused the Cloud-Light Sword Emperor's face to turn gloomy, and he was filled with boundless rage. Even he didn't expect that after sending out so many fellow Taoists, they actually couldn't even capture a single woman. Xie was charging forward with unstoppable momentum. But at this moment, boom! In the depths of the starry sky, there was a sudden movement. A spear with horrible Taoist light came roaring, as if it had broken the shackles of time and space. Puff, puff. The group of alien beasts that were originally scattered nearby didn't even have time to dodge, and the battle spear pierced a bloody path through them. On this path of blood, there were at least 30+ variant beasts that instantly perished. No matter their strengths, all of them were like pieces of paper, and they were unable to obstruct that spear in the slightest. It was too terrifying. The aura it emitted seemed to come from the ancient times. It was so domineering that it could kill anyone who stood in its way. "It's it!" An old monster screamed in horror. In the past 7 years, an old monster at the 6th level of the Emperor realm had been killed by a spear from the depths of the starry sky when he was stationed at the Great Wall. Many people guessed that the owner of the spear was a terrifying being from the other side of the starry sky. Now, the spear had appeared again. The Cloud-Light Sword Emperor and the others were startled and didn't hesitate to dodge. What made them rejoice was that this spear wasn't aimed at them. It was aimed at Lin Sun, who was going through the tribulation. Seeing this scene, the slender body of Summer Solstice, who was originally fighting, suddenly stiffened, and then suddenly rushed out, rushing towards the battle spear at full speed. No matter who it was, she couldn't tolerate being disturbed during Lin Sun's tribulation. However, to her despair, the spear was too fast. It seemed to be able to tear the shackles of time and space. In a flash, it had rushed under the tribulation cloud. Chapter 2276. A spear pierced through the starry sky. It was so domineering and unparalleled that it made all the emperors tremble in fear. No one dared to imagine how powerful the owner of this spear must have been. At this time, Lin Sun was at the critical moment of the tribulation. After repeated destruction and rebirth, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. His cultivation had long been on the verge of collapse and destruction. But Lin Sun knew that the decree tribulation thunder was about to be suppressed and refined by him. At this critical moment, the spear came across the sky so fast that Lin Sun didn't even have time to react. He could only watch helplessly. But in his heart, there was indescribable anger and unwillingness. Over the years, in order to become an emperor, he had paid a lot of effort and even experienced many life and death tribulations. It was not easy for him to go through one thunder tribulation after another and hold on to the last moment. But a sudden killing tribulation was about to destroy all of this. Who could be reconciled to this? Who could not be angry? "If I don't die, I will pay you back tenfold," he roared in his heart. His eyes were bleeding, and his whole person showed a kind of madness. There was no hope, so naturally there was no despair. But when he tried everything, even his life, to grasp this glimmer of hope, it was interrupted by an accident. This was undoubtedly the cruelest thing in the world. In the distance, 2 lines of blood flowed down Xie's face. Her body and mind showed signs of collapse. Over the years, she fought alone and experienced life and death alone. Everything was to protect the person in the distance who she regarded as more important than her own life. Even in front of the Great Wall this time, she was willing to exchange her life for Lin Sun's safety. But she didn't expect that at the most critical moment, she could only watch the spear sweeping towards Lin Sun, Girl, if you break the shackles of life, you won't be able to live. Don't worry, he won't die. A faint sigh suddenly resounded in Xiaji's mind. Following that, her power, which was about to collapse, was suppressed by a mysterious force. Xiaji suddenly looked up and saw that the spear that was about to kill Lin Sun stopped there, unable to move any further. It was as if an invisible hand had grabbed him. Lin Sun was surprised by this scene. At the same time, a voice sounded in his mind, "You're right. Focus on overcoming the tribulation." These 4 words seemed to have a strange magic power, sweeping away all the distractions in Lin's mind and making him extremely calm. A surprised voice rang out from the depths of the starry sky. Immediately afterward, the spear buzzed violently and flowed with terrifying light of the way. One could vaguely see an extremely ancient primordial rune appearing on the spear. Spirit. The aura exuded from the spear made the emperors in the distance feel despair. It was too terrifying, even more terrifying than the emperor ancestor's aura. But no matter how much the spear struggled, it could not move an inch further. Meanwhile, dong! This starry sky trembled, torn apart. A giant crack appeared, time power surging within the crack. Then, a great river surged, the power too great, triggering chaos in the great Tao laws, order becoming unstable. He tore through space-time. At this moment the great emperors were all shocked. This power was too terrifying, causing the order of heaven and earth to become unstable, disrupting the laws of this starry sky. It turned into a river of time that seemed to pass through the door of time. The heaven and earth shook. The river of time surged, waves rose to the sky, endless power of time flowed, and gradually, a grand diagram appeared. 3 stars lined up, a crescent moon hung high in the sky. A majestic figure stood above the waves of time, as if he was immortal and eternal. The aura he emitted completely suppressed this starry sky. This was too unbelievable, causing the emperors to shiver. A river of time broke through the void, a figure stood above it, the 3 stars and the crescent moon shining alone. Who was this, to be able to use the power of time and appear through spacetime? Almost at the same time, a voice rang out in the distant starry sky. "No matter who, do not stop us. Undying sovereigns are not allowed to appear here. Anyone who obstructs us will be our enemy. Back off." This was clearly not the voice of one person. Some were dignified, some were cold, some were indifferent. But when the voice rang out, it shook heaven and earth, like the sonorous voice of the great Tao. Before the voice finished resounding through the air, a giant axe, a sword, and a halberd tore through the starry sky and arrived swiftly. Every single treasure was filled with an undying aura, suffused with primal chaos and flowing with divine light. They were like true divine artifacts, and they intended to kill the majestic figure above the river of time. It was too fast. Everyone discovered to their horror that before this attack, their strength was completely suppressed, and they couldn't move at all. And at this moment, the figure above the river of time waved his sleeve. Waves surged, transforming into a feather of time that whistled through the air. The giant axe trembled violently, the sword was blasted back, and the halberd droned as it was blasted away. You want to ruin this unprecedented event with just a few treasures controlled by the power of will? All of you are overestimating yourselves. Waves of time surged. As the majestic figure spoke, the spear, giant axe, sword, and halberd were all suppressed, and they wailed without end, resounding through the depths of the universe. Rumble! The huge bodies of the alien beasts scattered in the distance all exploded at this moment, turning into a rain of blood. It seemed that an invisible divine power had swept across and wiped them out in an instant. Everyone was astounded and didn't dare believe this scene. Every single one of those thousands of cosmos beasts possessed might comparable to the Emperor realm, yet at this moment, they were completely annihilated like a whirlwind. Who on earth was that majestic figure, and how terrifying his cultivation was? With his protection, Who in the whole world could obstruct Lin Sun's tribulation? The more they thought about it, the more chilled they were. Roar! Soon, a roar sounded from the depths of the starry sky. Faster than the sound, a huge claw that could cover the sky came slapping down fiercely. The majestic figure stood still and slapped out his palm. Bang! The light of the Tao splashed, and the huge claw was twisted, suffering a heavy blow, and its flesh and blood collapsed. Only then did everyone see a huge and boundless alien beast rushing over. Its figure alone filled the starry sky, and every scale covering its body was bigger than the stars in the sky. However, before she could get a clear look, the cosmos beast had transformed into a humanoid being that wore an azure armor that even covered its face. Only a pair of scarlet-red eyes that were suffused with an icy cold and brutal glow could be seen. The aura emitted from his body was like that of a ruler from a foreign land, terrifying beyond measure. He stared at the majestic figure on the river of time, and his pupils flashed with fear, surprise, unwillingness, and so on. In the end, he couldn't help but raise his hand and throw out a bloody spear, which tore the sky and broke through. The majestic figure's back was facing everyone. Facing this attack, he casually pressed out a finger. Bang! The bloody spear exploded in the air. Witnessing this scene, the humanoid creature in blue armor no longer hesitated. He turned around and fled, disappearing into the depths of the starry sky in an instant. The great abyss devours the sky. No matter how long I have to wait, I will definitely seize you. The humanoid figure's unwilling roar resounded in the distance. The majestic figure remained indifferent and didn't chase. Because at this moment the spear, the Tao sword, the halberd, and the huge axe that he was suppressing suddenly emitted strange rumbles, and each of them shot out a magnificent rain of light. The majestic figure sighed. You didn't hesitate to burn your cultivation to traverse space and time, and you still want to project your will and Tao body over. It seems like you really won't give up. Before his voice faded away, the depths of the starry sky suddenly shone brightly, and a huge vortex appeared. The power of time rumbled and tore at the crack. Little girl, come here. The majestic figure spoke, and Xia Zhi's figure was suddenly moved to the front of the Great Wall. At this moment, accompanied by a rumble that sounded like the beginning of chaos, one figure after another walked out from the vortex crack. It was 3 men and 1 woman. Every single one of them flowed with an eternal and brilliant aura, and the energy of time that washed over them was neutralized by the energy around them. As soon as they appeared, the starry sky showed signs of collapsing. It was because the imposing aura they emanated was too terrifying, and it had arrived at an inconceivable state. Not to mention an ordinary Emperor realm cultivator, even an imperial ancestor would definitely feel oppressed and terrified. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The 4 treasures that were filled with eternal aura suddenly struggled free of their suppression, flashed out, and fell into the hands of the 3 men and 1 woman. As soon as they appeared, they first glanced at Lin Sun, who was overcoming the tribulation, and then they looked at the majestic figure that stood towering above the river of time. So long as he gives up on this path, then we'll leave right away. The person in the lead was a valiant man that was bathed in golden light. He held a spear in his hand, wore dark armor, and was covered in eternal light. He seemed like a supreme god. His voice rumbled and caused the starry sky to tremble. I've waited through the ages for this opportunity, so how could I possibly give it up just like that? The majestic figure's voice was flat like water, and it was indistinct. On the other hand, all of you traversed the starry sky and twisted the spatial passageway to come here, yet you merely sent your wills and bodies. There's nothing to worry about. Is that so? A robust figure spoke coldly while the black light around him rumbled and interweaved into eternal energy that surged and seethed. The enormous axe in his hand suddenly slashed forward. This strike simply seemed capable of splitting the world apart, and it possessed boundless might. As the light from the axe descended, it caused the river of time to roil and sway. Such an attack was completely unimaginable. It was too inconceivable that it was capable of shaking the energy of time. There was no doubt that the robust figure's strength was absolutely formidable to a terrifying extent, and it was even more terrifying than the imperial ancestors. However, the figure merely flicked his finger when facing this attack. Clang! The light of the Tao surged, and it was deafening. The imperial emperors felt a piercing pain in their ears while they saw stars, and their minds were shaken to the point their vital blood roiled. They couldn't help but turn pale with astonishment. A battle of this level had completely overturned their imaginations and exceeded their understanding,